The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of energy and life. But what happens when something claws its way into this reality from a dimension where souls are currency and darkness is absolute? What happens when hell itself tears a hole between universes and something damned emerges into a galaxy already drowning in tyranny? Coruscant's underworld had always been a place of shadows. Level 1313, buried beneath miles of civilization and forgotten by the gleaming spires above, was where the galaxy's refuse collected: smugglers, murderers, the desperate, and the lost. The Empire's pristine propaganda holos never showed these depths, where flickering neon signs advertised pleasures both legal and forbidden, where the air tasted of recycled toxins and despair. It was here, in an abandoned industrial sector where rusted machinery groaned like dying beasts, that reality screamed. The rift appeared without warning, not a hyperspace signature, not an energy spike that any scanner could detect. One moment, there was only darkness and decay. The next, the air itself tore open like flesh beneath a blade. Green hellfire erupted from the wound in space, and the temperature plummeted 20 degrees in an instant. Vagrant squatters scattered, their survival instincts overwhelming their curiosity. Something fell through the rift. He hit the duracrete floor hard enough to crack it, his crimson cape spreading around him like arterial spray. The symbiotic suit covering his body writhed and pulsed, its living necroplasm confused, disoriented. Chains rattled against metal as he pushed himself up, white eyes glowing from within, a mask that had witnessed the deepest pits of damnation. Al Simmons, Spawn, dragged himself to his knees and immediately knew something was catastrophically wrong. The power that sustained him, the necroplasm that Malbolgia had bound to his resurrected corpse, felt thin, distant, like trying to breathe through cloth. The counter in his mind, that ever-present awareness of his finite power, flickered erratically. The connection to hell itself, that terrible umbilical cord that had defined his existence, had stretched across dimensions and frayed. But something else filled the void, something vast and omnipresent, an energy that permeated every molecule of this place. It pressed against his consciousness like invisible hands. Curiosity and malevolence intertwined. The Force, though Spawn had no name for it yet, recognized him as an intrusion, a foreign darkness that didn't belong. Where the hell? Spawn's voice was a growl, distorted by the mask. The rift behind him collapsed with a sound like breaking glass, sealing shut. No way back. Malbolgia's laughter echoed in his memory. Another manipulation. Another betrayal. He stood, cape settling around his shoulders with predatory grace. The industrial sector stretched in all directions, a maze of corroded platforms and defunct assembly lines. Distant sounds filtered through the gloom, voices speaking, languages he'd never heard. Mechanical whirring that wasn't quite right. The hum of technology that felt simultaneously advanced and ancient. Then he sensed them, eyes watching from the darkness. Not human eyes, something hungrier. A pack of what looked like massive hairless rats with too many teeth emerged from the shadows, their cybernetic implants glinting. Corellian slice hounds, augmented by some mad tinkerer and left to fend for themselves in the deep levels. They'd learned that anything new in their territory was either food or competition. The lead hound lunged. Spawn's chains erupted from his body with thought-speed precision, necroplasmic links materializing from nothing and everything simultaneously. They caught the creature mid-leap, wrapped around its torso, and slammed it into a support pillar hard enough to leave a dent. The other hounds attacked as a pack, but they were fighting something that had battled demons in Hell's throne room. His cape exploded outward, transforming into a writhing mass of black tendrils that caught, crushed, and threw with vicious efficiency. One hound tried to bite through the symbiote and discovered that Spawn's suit bit back, necroplasmic. Spikes erupted from his arm, impaling the creature before it could retreat. The fight lasted 30 seconds. When it ended, the hounds that could still move fled into the darkness, and Spawn stood among the casualties, breathing hard. The effort had cost him. He could feel his power draining faster than it should. Without Hell's direct connection, every use of necroplasm depleted reserves he couldn't easily replenish. In his own world, the counter would tick down slowly. Here, it felt like trying to run on fumes. But that other energy, that omnipresent force he'd felt, seemed to pulse, stronger in the aftermath of violence, especially the dark undercurrents, the fear and pain and death that permeated these lower levels. It called to something in the necroplasm, resonated with it. Spawn didn't know it yet, but the dark side of the force had just noticed him. And in the spires far above, in an imperial stronghold where black-armored figures meditated on violence and persecution, sensors began to register an anomaly, a presence. Something dark and powerful and utterly foreign had just announced itself to every force-sensitive being on Coruscant. The Inquisitors were coming. Spawn looked up through the skeletal remains of ancient structures, seeing layer upon layer of civilization built on top of each other, disappearing into artificial light pollution and distance. Somewhere up, there was a way out. Somewhere up, there were answers. He started walking, cape trailing behind him like a promise of violence, chains rattling with each step. Coruscant's underworld had seen horrors before, trafficking, murder, depravity in every conceivable form. But it had never seen anything like the Hellspawn. And neither had the Empire. If you want to see more characters, enter the Star Wars galaxy. Hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The industrial sector's emergency lighting flickered as Spawn passed beneath it, casting his shadow in 12 different directions at once. Each shadow seemed to move independently, writhing with barely contained power. In the distance, alarms began to sound. Security droids, perhaps, or worse. This galaxy's version of law enforcement. Let them come. He'd fought angels and demons. Whatever this place threw at him, he'd survive it. He always did. That's what being damned meant. You didn't get to die until hell was finished with you. Section 2. The Inquisitorious Fortress occupied one of Coruscant's mid-levels, a black pyramid of imperial architecture that squatted over the city like a carrion bird. Within its meditation chambers, 7 Inquisitors felt the disturbance simultaneously, a ripple in the force so alien, so wrong, that it felt like a scream in a language that shouldn't exist. The fifth brother was the first to speak, his broad gray face twisting with confusion. "What is that? Dark side?" The seventh sister hissed, her red eyes narrowing. But not Sith, not Jedi fallen to shadow. Something else. The Grand Inquisitor himself stood at the chamber's center, his Powan features gaunt and terrible in the red light. He'd felt many things through the Force: fear, hatred, the final moments of dying. Jedi. But this presence carried a quality he'd never encountered. It tasted of death, yes, but death that had been conquered, enslaved, weaponized. It reminded him of the ancient Sith texts he'd studied, the forbidden knowledge of Korriban's tombs. Yet even that comparison fell short. Lord Vader must be informed, the Grand Inquisitor said quietly. But first, we investigate. Fifth brother, seventh sister, with me. The rest of you, secure the perimeter. If this being attempts to reach the upper levels, I want every access point monitored. And if it's a survivor? The seventh sister asked. Another Jedi who's finally broken? Then we do what we always do. The Grand Inquisitor's yellow eyes gleamed. We turn them, or we kill them. 3 Inquisitors descended into Coruscant's depths, their double-bladed lightsabers unignited but ready, their presence in the Force concealed through techniques Vader himself had taught them. They were hunters, and they'd tracked Force sensitives through worse terrain than this. What they didn't know was that their prey could feel them coming. Spawn had found temporary shelter in what appeared to be an abandoned cantina, its broken furniture and shattered bottles suggesting a violent past. He sat in the darkness, cape wrapped around him like a cocoon, trying to understand what was happening to his power. The necroplasm wasn't dying, it was adapting. Slowly, painfully, the symbiote was learning to draw sustenance from this reality's energy. That omnipresent force, especially its darker currents, resonated with the hellborn essence of his suit. Every time someone died in the levels around him, and in Coruscant's underworld, death was constant. He felt a small surge of power. Every act of violence, every moment of hatred or despair, fed him in ways that felt disturbingly familiar. It was like hell had found a new way to chain him. His tactical mind, honed by years as a Black Ops soldier and then refined through supernatural warfare, cataloged what he'd learned. The technology here was beyond anything on Earth: energy weapons, artificial gravity, faster than light travel-based. On the Star Destroyers he'd glimpsed, through grimy windows. But the people were still people. They bled, they feared, they died. That was universal. The chains around his waist shifted restlessly, sensing his agitation. The symbiote whispered wordlessly, alert to approaching danger. Three presences, coming fast. They felt different from the scavengers and criminals he'd sensed in the surrounding blocks. These three carried something focused, disciplined, power-wrapped in purpose. Spawn stood, his cape spreading as shadows deepened around him. He moved to the cantina's entrance, wide eyes scanning the rusted walkways and suspended platforms. There, three figures in dark armor, moving with predatory grace. Two flanked a taller central figure whose species Spawn didn't recognize, but whose bearing screamed authority. The Grand Inquisitor stopped 30 meters away, finally allowing his presence in the Force to become visible. He'd expected the intruder to react with fear or aggression. Instead, the crimson-caped figure simply watched them, utterly still, radiating a darkness that made even the Inquisitor's trained senses recoil. "Identify yourself," the Grand Inquisitor commanded, his voice carrying across the distance. "You carry the taint of the dark side, yet you are unknown to the Empire. Explain your presence on Coruscant, or be destroyed." Spawn's voice emerged like gravel and broken glass. "I don't answer to empires. Not yours, not anyone's." The Seventh Sister's lightsaber ignited with a snap hiss, casting red light across the walkway. "Arrogant. Let me teach it respect, Master." "Patience," the Grand Inquisitor cautioned, though his own weapon came alive, a double-bladed crimson saber that spun once in his hands. "This one is different. I sense no midi-chlorians, no connection to the Force as we know it. Yet the darkness around it is." He paused, searching for words. "Absolute." Spawn had no idea what they were talking about, midi-chlorians, the Force, any of it. But he recognized religious zealots when he saw them. Their weapons were interesting, though. Blades made of pure energy, contained by some kind of magnetic field. Lightsabers, his military mind classified, filing the information away. Dangerous in close quarters. Limited reach. Effective against conventional materials. Against necroplasm? He'd find out. Last chance. The fifth brother rumbled, his massive frame moving forward. "Submit to Imperial custody, or we take you by force." Spawn's laugh was hollow, echoing. "You really don't know who you're threatening, do you?" His cape exploded outward like a living thing, transforming into a massive maw of black tendrils that reached across the distance faster than the Inquisitors expected. The fifth brother brought his lightsaber up, the crimson blade slicing through necroplasmic matter, and then more tendrils wrapped around his arms, his legs, lifting him off his feet. The Seventh Sister leaped, her acrobatics enhanced by the Force, her lightsaber spinning in a defensive pattern. She'd fought Jedi Masters who'd survived Order 66, warriors with decades of experience. But Spawn wasn't a Force user. He fought like a soldier who'd been to hell and learned its lessons. Chains erupted from beneath her, necroplasmic links materializing from the shadows themselves. She deflected one with her lightsaber, the energy blade passed through the chain, without resistance, because the chain was already dissipating and reforming around her guard. Another chain caught her ankle, jerked her off balance. She cut through it, but three more replaced it. The Grand Inquisitor watched his subordinates struggle for precisely 5 seconds before making his decision. This being wasn't just powerful, it was adaptable, creative, experienced. The darkness around it didn't flow through the Force. It existed independent of it, a foreign corruption that somehow still resonated with the dark side's fundamental nature. Lord Vader needed to see this. "Retreat," he commanded sharply. The fifth brother and seventh sister disengaged immediately, their training overriding pride. They'd been taught that survival served the Empire better than pointless martyrdom. Spawn let them go, his cape retracting, chains dissolving back into necroplasm. He could have pursued, but these three were clearly scouts. Killing them would bring more, and he needed information before he committed to wholesale slaughter. The Grand Inquisitor studied Spawn one final time, committing every detail to memory. "You have made a grave mistake, stranger. The Empire does not tolerate unknown powers within its domain. Lord Vader himself will come for you, and when he does, your darkness will be measured against his." Then they were gone. disappearing into the vertical maze of Coruscant's architecture with force-enhanced speed. Spawn stood alone in the aftermath, power crackling around his fists. Vader. Another name. Another threat. Fine. He dealt with Hell's generals and Heaven's warriors. This galaxy's tyrants would learn the same lesson. Some things stay dead when you kill them. Some things don't. And the things that come back are always angrier. The symbiote pulsed with dark satisfaction. It had tasted this reality's power, that force energy the attackers wielded, and found it compatible, useful, corruptible. Spawn felt the first stirrings of something dangerous, the realization that this galaxy's darkness could feed him, sustain him, perhaps even free him from Hell's leash. But freedom always came with a price. He'd learned that lesson bleeding out in an alley, betrayed by the government he'd served. High above, in the Imperial Palace, the Grand Inquisitor delivered his report to a towering figure in black armor, whose very presence seemed to darken the room. Darth Vader listened in silence, his mechanical breathing the only sound. When the report concluded, Vader spoke, his voice a deep mechanical rasp. "Show me." The Grand Inquisitor projected holographic footage from his helmet recorder, blurry, damaged by the necroplasmic interference, but clear enough. Vader watched the crimson-caped figure fight, watched the chains and cape move with impossible fluidity, watched darkness manifest as physical matter. "Not a Force user," Vader stated. Yet the dark side responds to it. "Yes, my lord. I've never encountered anything like." "You have encountered nothing," Vader interrupted. "This being has fought for far longer than your pitiful existence. I sense centuries of violence in its wake." The Dark Lord turned to face the viewport. Coruscant's endless cityscape spreading below. "The Emperor will want to know of this. Should we prepare a full assault, Lord Vader?" "No." Vader's hands clenched into fists. "I will handle this personally. Something that has escaped death itself deserves my full attention." In the underworld far below, Spawn felt a new presence bloom in that omnipresent energy field, vast, terrible, absolutely focused on him, like staring into the eyes of a predator that had just decided you were worth hunting. He smiled beneath his mask. "Good. Let them come." He'd always preferred enemies who didn't hide. Spawn needed resources, information, and time to fully understand his situation. The encounter with the Inquisitors had confirmed several things. This galaxy had organized military forces with exotic weapons. Some kind of energy-based power system, these zealots called the Force, and a hierarchical structure that responded quickly to threats. Military intelligence gathering. He'd done it 100 times for the CIA. And the principles didn't change just because the battlefield was a planet-sized city. He moved through level 1313 like a ghost. Cape wrapped tight to avoid attention. Mask's features smoothed into something almost human. The symbiote could mimic textures, approximate normal clothing if he concentrated. Not perfectly, the necroplasm retained an oily, living quality that unsettled anyone who looked too closely, but enough to avoid immediate scrutiny. In a place where everyone had something to hide, the cantinas and trade posts of the underworld operated on universal constants. Information flowed through alcohol, credits bought silence, and everyone was looking for an angle. Spawn watched from shadowed corners as deals went down in a dozen languages. He saw weapons that fired concentrated energy, blasters, he heard them called. Holographic displays showed news from across the galaxy. Images of white armored soldiers and massive triangular warships. The Galactic Empire, they said. Peace through order. Prosperity through compliance. Propaganda. He'd seen it before, different uniforms, same lies. But one conversation caught his attention. Two Rodian smugglers, their green skin mottled with scars, speaking in hushed tones about a shipment gone wrong. Imperial Customs had seized their cargo, spice from Kessel, worth 200,000 credits. Their employer, a Hutt named Gracchus, was not pleased. "He'll have us fed to his menagerie," one Rodian hissed and accented. "Basic. Unless we bring him something valuable, something to make him forget the loss. What could possibly be worth?" The Empire's offering bounties. That disturbance in the lower levels, the one that spooked the Inquisitors. 50,000 credits for information leading to capture. Spawn's interest sharpened. They were already putting prices on his head. Fast work. The second Rodian's eyes widened. The Inquisitors ran from something? What kind of creature could? Doesn't matter. We find it. We tell Gracchus. He tells the Empire. We get paid, and maybe keep our intestines internal. Simple. They left the cantina. Checking weapons, Spawn recognized as crude but effective blaster pistols. Probably military surplus. He followed at a distance, cape spreading thin across the walls. Necroplasm adapting to use shadows as camouflage. The symbiote was learning this environment's properties quickly, discovering that darkness here was abundant and deep. The Rhodians led him 3 levels down, into territory that made level 1313 look civilized. Here, the city's infrastructure had failed decades ago. Jury-rig power cables sparked and hissed. The air recyclers coughed toxic fumes. Vagrant communities huddled around burning refuse, their faces gaunt with malnutrition and spice addiction. And at the center of this decay sat Gracchus, the Hutt's palace, a fortress carved from ancient foundation blocks, guarded by species Spawn didn't recognize. Gamorreans with crude axes and battle-scarred hide. Weequay mercenaries with projectile rifles and thermal detonators on their belts. A Wookiee in chains, its brown fur matted with blood, forced to stand guard despite obvious injury. Spawn felt the old, familiar anger. Kindle. Slavery. Torture. Exploitation of the weak. Hell's greatest hits, played out on an alien stage. The Rhodians approached the main entrance, arguing with guards in a language of grunts and snarls. Credits changed hands. They were admitted, disappearing into the palace's maw. Spawn studied the fortress with a tactician's eye. Front entrance was suicide, too many guards, too many choke points. But places like this always had service entrances, waste disposal, ventilation systems large enough for maintenance access. The powerful never considered that their garbage could be a weakness. He found it on the palace's eastern side, a disposal chute, approximately 2 meters wide, protected by a rusted grate. The symbiote's strength made short work of the metal, peeling it back silently. The stench that emerged would have gagged a normal human. Spawn had crawled through hell's sewers. This was nothing. He slipped inside, cape compressing around him, chains retracted. The chute descended at a steep angle, slick with organic waste and chemical runoff. He controlled his slide with necroplasmic tendrils, silent as death, until he reached the bottom, a processing center where droids sorted through refuse with mechanical efficiency. The droids didn't even register his presence. Their sensors were calibrated for material analysis, not intruders. Spawn moved past them into the palace proper, following the sound of raised voices. Gracchus the Hutt's throne room was a monument to excess and cruelty. The Hutt himself was massive, easily 4 tons of slug-like flesh, his eyes intelligent and utterly amoral. He lounged on a raised platform, surrounded by wealth plundered from across the galaxy, ancient weapons, Jedi artifacts behind stasis fields, artwork stolen from conquered worlds. Slave dancers performed for his amusement, their collars glowing with restraint field indicators. The 2 Rhodians stood before him, presenting their information. Spawn couldn't understand the language Gracchus spoke. Huttese. Probably, but the translator collar on a nearby majordomo provided. Basic translation. You interrupt my evening with rumors? Gracchus's voice was a bass rumble, amused and dangerous. The Inquisitors investigate disturbances constantly. Why should this interest me? Great Gracchus, the first Rhodian bowed low. This one is different. The Inquisitors fled. Something down here made them retreat. The Empire's bounty. The Empire's bounty is worthless if I cannot deliver. Gracchus leaned forward, his bulk shifting with wet sounds. Unless you've actually found this creature? The Rhodians exchanged glances, their confidence faltering. We know where it was last seen. We can track. You waste my time with speculation. Gracchus gestured lazily. A Gamorrean guard stepped forward, raising a vibro axe. Perhaps your organs will be more useful than your intelligence. Spawn had seen enough. He dropped from the shadows of the vaulted ceiling, cape spreading like wings, landing directly between the Rhodians and their executioner. The impact cratered the marble floor. Every weapon in the room turned toward him instantly. The throne room froze. Gracchus's eyes widened, then narrowed with calculation. The Hutt had survived centuries through cunning and ruthlessness, and he recognized immediately that something extraordinary had just entered his domain. Well, Gracchus said slowly, his voice shifting to interested rather than angry. It seems the mountain has come to the prophet. You are the disturbance everyone whispers about. Spawn's mask solidified, white eyes blazing. His voice emerged distorted and human. I need information. You're going to give it to me. The guards moved to intercede, but Gracchus raised a hand, stopping them. The Hutt's expression was unreadable, a mixture of fear and avarice. Whatever this being was, it represented opportunity. The Empire would pay fortunes for its capture, but trying to capture it might prove fatal. Bold, Gracchus rumbled. Foolish, but bold. You walk into my palace, threaten me before my court, and expect cooperation. He laughed, a sound like grinding stone. I admire confidence. Very well. Ask your questions. If your information is worth more to me than the Empire's bounty, perhaps we can negotiate. I'm not negotiating. Spawn's chains materialized, rattling against the floor. You're going to tell me about this Empire. About the Force. About the people with the laser swords who think they can hunt me. And you're going to tell me how to survive in this galaxy. Gracchus studied him for a long moment. Reading body language, threat assessment, probability of survival. The Hutt hadn't built his criminal empire through cowardice, but neither had he maintained it through suicidal pride. Release my guards, Gracchus said carefully. Let them leave. Then we talk, just you and I. I have survived clone wars, Jedi purges, and Imperial occupation through one simple principle: knowing when to fight and when to deal. Today, I choose to deal. Spawn's chains retracted slightly. Not disappearing, a message that violence remained an option, but allowing space for conversation. The guards backed away slowly, weapons still raised, moving to positions that covered exits but didn't threaten. Directly. Smart, Spawn said. Start talking. And Gracchus did. The Hutt spoke for an hour, painting a picture of a galaxy that made Spawn's understanding of hell seem parochially limited. An empire spanning millions of worlds. Technology that bent spacetime. The Force, a mystical energy field that connected all living things. Wielded by warrior monks called Jedi and their dark counterparts. The Sith, the Emperor Palpatine, who had orchestrated the Jedi's extinction and seized absolute power. Darth Vader, his enforcer, a being of such terrible strength that even the criminal underworld spoke his name in whispers. The Inquisitors you encountered are Vader's hunting dogs. Gracchus explained. They find Force-sensitive beings and either turn them to the Empire's service or kill them. The fact that they fled from you. The Hutt's eyes gleamed. That means Vader himself will come. He always does, when something interests him. Let him, Spawn said. But internally, his tactical mind was racing. This Vader sounded dangerous, not just powerful, but experienced. A warrior who'd survived galactic conflict and purges. The kind of enemy you didn't underestimate. Your power, Gracchus continued carefully. It's not the Force. I've seen many Force users in my centuries. You're something else. Something. He paused, searching for words. Foreign. I'm not from your galaxy, Spawn admitted. No point hiding it. The Hutt clearly understood more than most. Got pulled through from somewhere else. My power works differently here. That Force energy you mentioned, I can feel it. Especially the dark parts. Gracchus's expression shifted to something almost resembling concern. The dark side calls to you? That's dangerous. The Emperor and Vader, they've mastered it. If you try to wield it without understanding. I've dealt with dark powers before, Spawn interrupted. Sold my soul. Went to hell, clawed my way back. Whatever this dark side is, it's not worse than what I've already survived. The Hutt was silent for a moment. Then he laughed, genuine and dark. You might be right. Or you might be the most arrogant being I've ever met. Either way, you intrigue me. He gestured to a side chamber. I have resources. Weapons, information networks, contacts across Coruscant. Help me with a problem, and I'll help you understand this galaxy. Refuse, and I'll simply wait for Vader to collect you and claim my bounty. Your choice. Spawn considered. He needed allies, however temporary. This Hutt was a criminal and a slaver, everything. Spawn despised, but pragmatism had kept him alive in hell. Principles were luxuries for people who weren't damned. What's the problem? Gracchus smiled, revealing rows of tiny teeth. The Empire seized a shipment of mine, ancient Jedi artifacts I'd acquired for my collection. They're being held in a garrison 5 levels up, scheduled for transport to an Imperial vault tomorrow. I want them back. You want to test yourself against Imperial forces. Mutually beneficial. And if I refuse, then this conversation ends. And I activate the silent alarm I triggered the moment you arrived. 50 stormtroopers are already surrounding this block. You'll escape. Probably. You're clearly capable, but you'll learn nothing, gain nothing, and still have Vader hunting you. Spawn's eyes narrowed. The Hutt was bluffing about the alarm. Spawn would have sensed increased military presence through the necroplasms, connection to surrounding life forces. But the logic was sound. He needed to understand this galaxy's military capabilities, and raiding an Imperial garrison would provide valuable tactical intelligence. Show me the layout, Spawn said. I'll get your artifacts. But when this is done, you owe me more than information. I need a place to operate from, somewhere the Empire can't easily reach. Gracchus's laugh rumbled through the throne room. Ambitious. I like it. Very well, Hellspawn. Oh yes, I know things, I hear things, we have an accord. Betray me, and I'll find ways to make even the undead suffer. Succeed, and you'll have Gracchus the Hutt as an associate. Not an ally, not a friend, an associate. The criminal underworld's version of a non-aggression pact. Spawn nodded once. He'd made worse deals. At least this one came with useful intelligence, and a chance to measure the Empire's strength firsthand. Outside, in the darkness of Coruscant's lower levels, Imperial probe droids swept through abandoned sectors, their sensors calibrated for dark side signatures. Vader's command had been absolute. Find the intruder. Track it, but do not engage. The Dark Lord himself was preparing for the hunt, and this time, he would not delegate. The Imperial garrison occupied a reinforced bunker on level 900, where Coruscant's underworld met the lower edges of legitimate civilization. It was a transitional zone, too valuable to abandon completely, too corrupted by proximity to the depths below to ever be truly clean. The Empire maintained a presence here through brute force, durasteel walls, automated turrets, and 2 full squads of stormtroopers rotated every 6 hours. Spawn crouched on a suspended platform half a kilometer away, watching the garrison through eyes that saw in perfect darkness. Gracchus's intelligence had been thorough. Shift changes, weapon placements, security protocols, even the biometric signatures of the commanding officer. The Hutt's information network was impressive, built over centuries of surviving through knowledge. Beside Spawn, projected from a handheld holoprojector, flickered a 3-dimensional schematic of the garrison's interior. The Jedi artifacts were held in a vault on the 3rd sublevel, behind blast doors and energy shields. Standard security would have been challenging for a conventional infiltrator. Spawn wasn't conventional. The shift change happens in 12 minutes. Came Gracchus's voice through a comlink disguised as an ornate ring. That's your window. Get in. Retrieve my property. Get out. Try not to massacre everyone. Dead stormtroopers bring Vader faster than stolen artifacts. No promises, Spawn replied. The symbiote was eager, hungry. It had fed on the dark side energy permeating Coruscant's lower levels, drawing strength from violence and suffering, the way it once fed on Hell's necrotic power. The adaptation was nearly complete now. He could feel his reserves stabilizing, power returning to something approaching full capacity. But that power came with a cost he was only beginning to understand. Every time he drew on the dark side, every time that force energy flowed through the necroplasm, he felt something watching, something ancient and vast, like standing at the edge of an abyss that stared back with hungry interest. The Emperor, maybe, or the dark side itself, curious about this foreign corruption that had entered its domain. Spawn pushed the concern aside. He'd worry about metaphysical consequences after, surviving the immediate physical ones. The shift change began precisely on schedule. 2 squads of stormtroopers, 24 soldiers in white plastoid armor, assembled in the garrison's courtyard for inspection. Their discipline was admirable, movements synchronized, weapons held at identical angles. The Empire trained its soldiers well. Spawn moved. He didn't teleport, not yet. The symbiote's dimensional shifting still felt unstable in this reality. Unpredictable. Instead, he used the cape, spreading it wide and dropping from the platform. The living fabric caught air currents, gliding silently across the gap. He landed on the garrison's exterior wall without sound, necroplasmic matter absorbing impact. The automated turrets swiveled, sensors scanning for intrusion. But Spawn had wrapped himself in shadows so deep they bent light. A trick the symbiote had learned from this galaxy's pervasive darkness. The turret's optical systems registered nothing. Their motion sensors detected only wind. Their thermal imaging found ambient temperature. He was a ghost, and ghosts didn't trigger alarms. The ventilation shaft was where Gracchus said it would be, 3 meters wide, protected by a grate that the symbiote peeled back like paper. Spawn slipped inside, cape compressing, chains retracted tight against his body. The shaft descended at a steep angle, past guard stations and barracks, past armories and command centers, down to the sublevels where sensitive materials were stored. He paused at an intersection, listening. Voices echoed up from below, 2 stormtroopers on patrol, their armor servos whirring softly. They were discussing the latest propaganda holos. Something about a rebel defeat at Scarif. The conversation was mundane, human. Soldiers being soldiers, filling endless watch hours with meaningless talk. Spawn had been that soldier once. Before the betrayal. Before Chapel shot him in that alley and Malbolgia claimed his soul. The memory hardened something in him. These stormtroopers served an empire built on tyranny. But they were still just people following orders, convinced they were maintaining peace. He'd been the same once, killing targets the government designated, believing the lies about national security. He dropped past them without engagement, silent as falling snow. The mission was retrieval, not massacre. He could show restraint when it served a purpose. The vault's sublevel was colder, temperature regulated for artifact preservation. Spawn emerged from the ventilation system into a corridor lined with storage chambers, each sealed behind energy fields that hummed with power. Security here was lighter than expected, only 2 guards, both focused on a datapad displaying some kind of entertainment program. Spawn's chains lashed out before either guard could react. Necroplasmic links wrapped around throats, squeezed just hard enough to cut off consciousness without killing. The guards crumpled, and Spawn dragged them into a storage closet, securing them with their own binders. The vault door was ahead, marked with Imperial insignia and warning glyphs in Basic and Orbesh. Authorized personnel only. Deadly force authorized. Spawn studied the locking mechanism, biometric scanner, keypad, retinal verification, triple redundancy. The Empire took its security seriously. The symbiote flowed over his hand, reshaping, forming tendrils thin enough to slip into the mechanism's internal circuits. Necroplasm was matter and energy simultaneously, existing in states conventional physics couldn't explain. It felt the electronic pathways, the security protocols, the authorization codes stored in molecular circuits. And it corrupted them. The dark side responded to Spawn's intrusion instinctively, drawn to corruption like iron to magnets. Energy flowed through the necroplasm, through Spawn, amplifying his power. The vault's security system fought back, countermeasures triggered, alarms prepared to sound, but the dark side was stronger, hungrier. It wanted this corruption. It fed on it. The vault door opened with a pneumatic hiss. Inside, bathed in preservation lighting, sat Gracchus's stolen property. Lightsabers, dozens of them, their hilts ranging from elegant to brutally simple. Holocrons, their geometric forms glowing faintly with stored knowledge. Ancient texts, the physical kind, bound in materials Spawn didn't recognize. Jedi artifacts, relics of an order the Empire had exterminated. Spawn felt something unexpected looking at them, respect. These had belonged to warriors, to people who'd stood for something, before being betrayed by the government they served. The parallels weren't lost on him. He grabbed a storage container from the wall, began loading artifacts. The lightsabers felt warm to the touch, almost alive. The holocrons pulsed when he handled them, as if recognizing something in the necroplasm. One holocron in particular, a dark red pyramid, seemed to resonate with his power, its glow intensifying. Interesting, Spawn muttered, pocketing it separately. Gracchus would get his artifacts, but this one felt important. Personal. Alarms shattered the silence. Not from the vault, from everywhere. The garrison's entire security system lit up simultaneously. Klaxons wailing, blast doors sealing. Spawn's intrusion had finally been detected, but not by conventional sensors. Someone force-sensitive had felt him using the dark side. You need to move now. Gracchus's voice crackled through the comlink. They're sealing the building. If you get trapped. Spawn was already moving. cape transforming into a battering ram that smashed through the vault's rear wall. Durasteel crumpled like foil under necroplasmic force. He emerged into a maintenance tunnel, sprinting at superhuman speed, the container of artifacts secured to his back by living chains. Behind him, stormtroopers poured into the vault's sublevel, their blasters firing. Bolts of superheated plasma streaked past Spawn's head, impact points glowing on the tunnel walls. He raised his cape without breaking stride. The symbiotic fabric spread wide, absorbing blaster fire, the energy dissipating harmlessly across its impossible surface. Target is heading for the eastern exit. A stormtrooper commander's voice echoed through the garrison's intercom. All units converge. We have authorization for lethal force. Spawn hit the eastern corridor at full speed and found it blocked. 20 stormtroopers in formation. 11 blasters raised. A heavy repeating cannon being wheeled into position. Behind them, the blast door was halfway sealed, descending like a guillotine. Surrender, the lead trooper commanded. There is no escape. Spawn's response was a laugh that echoed off Durasteel walls. Hollow and terrible, his chains erupted forward in a wave of necroplasmic fury. They wrapped around weapons, around limbs, around the repeating cannon itself, crushing Durasteel and Plastoid with equal ease. Stormtroopers fired desperately, their shots wild, panic overriding training. The capes spread like wings, then folded inward, becoming a cyclone of black tendrils that swept through the formation. Like a living tornado, Spawn didn't kill, restrained himself through pure discipline, but he didn't need to. Broken bones and unconsciousness served just as well as death for clearing a path. He dove under the descending blast door with half a second to spare. Rolled, came up running. The garrison's main courtyard was ahead, and beyond it, freedom. But the courtyard wasn't empty. She stood at its center, lightsaber ignited and spinning, the seventh sister. Her red blade carving figure eights in the air. Her presence in the force like a scalpel of concentrated malice. Around her, 10 stormtroopers formed a perimeter. Weapons trained on the exit Spawn was about to use. I told the Grand Inquisitor you'd be back, she purred, her voice carrying predatory satisfaction. Creatures like you can't resist causing chaos. It's your nature. And now you're mine. Spawn slowed to a walk, then stopped. The container of artifacts weighed heavy on his back. But his power was surging, fed by violence and the dark side energy that permeated this confrontation. He could feel the seventh sister's confidence, her certainty that her training and force abilities made her superior. She'd never fought something from hell. You had your chance to walk away, Spawn said quietly. I'm giving you one more. Take it. The seventh sister's laugh was cruel. You don't give orders here, abomination. The Empire commands, and you will obey or be destroyed. She shifted into an aggressive stance, lightsaber held in a two-handed grip. I've killed Jedi Masters. You're just another corpse waiting to happen. No, Spawn corrected, his voice dropping to something below human register, something that made even the stormtroopers step back involuntarily. I'm the corpse that already happened. I'm what comes back. He moved. The seventh sister was fast, force-enhanced reflexes, years of combat training. Inquisitor conditioning that pushed human limitations to their breaking point. Her lightsaber became a crimson blur, deflecting chains, cutting through necroplasmic tendrils. Her movements precise and lethal. But Spawn had fought Billy Kincaid, who moved faster than human eyes could track. He'd battled Violator, who could reshape reality with a thought. He'd gone toe-to-toe with Malbolgia himself in Hell's throne room. The seventh sister was skilled. She wasn't in his league. A chain wrapped around her lightsaber hilt, yanking it from her grip. She summoned the Force, pulling the weapon back to her hand, and found 3 more chains waiting, wrapping around her arms, her legs, lifting her off the ground. She struggled, drawing on the dark side, her power flaring like a dark star. Spawn felt that power wash over him, through him. The dark side recognized kinship in his necroplasm, tried to connect, to corrupt, to control. For a moment, Spawn felt its seductive promise, unlimited power, freedom from Hell's chains, mastery over this entire galaxy if he just accepted it fully. He'd heard those promises before, in different words, from different demons. The answer was always the same. No. He slammed the seventh sister into the courtyard floor, hard enough to crack the duracrete, gentle enough not to kill. Her lightsaber skittered away, deactivating. She lay there, gasping, her Inquisitor confidence shattered. "Tell your masters," Spawn said, standing over her, "that I'm not their enemy unless they make me one. I don't want this galaxy. I don't want their empire. I just want to be left alone." Then he was gone, cape spreading, launching him into the vertical maze of Coruscant's architecture. Behind him, the stormtroopers helped the seventh sister to her feet, and she stared at the point where Spawn had vanished, her expression mixing rage with something else. Fear. She'd felt something in that darkness. Something worse than any Sith she'd encountered. The dark side had responded to him, but it didn't control him. He wielded darkness without being its servant. That made him more dangerous than any Jedi. High above, in the Imperial Palace, Vader watched the garrison's security footage with absolute focus. He'd felt the confrontation through the Force, felt the moment when his Inquisitor's confidence broke against something alien and implacable. "Impressive," Vader rumbled. He restrains himself, shows mercy even when threatened. The Emperor's holographic form materialized beside him, distorted by the transmission, but the malevolence unmistakable. "You find weakness impressive, my apprentice? I find adaptation impressive, my master." This being comes from beyond our reality. Yet within hours he's learned to draw power from the dark side. He doesn't serve it. He uses it as a tool. Vader's mechanical breathing filled the silence. That suggests intelligence and will. Dangerous qualities in an enemy. Or useful qualities in a servant, Palpatine countered. His voice like poison honey. "Bring him to me, Lord Vader. Alive. Something that has conquered death itself could prove invaluable." "As you wish, my master." The hologram faded, leaving Vader alone with the security footage. He replayed the moment when Spawn broke the Seventh Sister's attack, analyzing every movement, every display of power. The being fought with military precision enhanced by supernatural ability. No wasted motion, no grandstanding, just efficient, brutal effectiveness. Vader understood that kind of warrior. He'd been one before the suit, before Mustafar, when he was still Anakin Skywalker and the galaxy feared the hero with no fear. This would be a worthy hunt. In Gracchus's palace, Spawn dropped the container of artifacts at the hut's base. The stolen treasures intact and accounted for. Gracchus examined them with greedy satisfaction, his massive hands surprisingly gentle with the ancient relics. "Excellent work," the hut rumbled. "You've earned your payment. Information, sanctuary, and my discretion." His eyes narrowed with amusement. "Though I suspect discretion won't help much now. You've humiliated an Inquisitor. Vader will come personally." "Let him," Spawn said, though uncertainty gnawed beneath the bravado. He'd felt that presence while escaping, that vast dark weight focusing on him like the eye of a malevolent god. Vader was different from the Inquisitors. Stronger, more dangerous. Spawn pulled the red holocron from his belt, the one that had resonated with his power. "What's this?" Gracchus's expression shifted to something approaching alarm. "Put that down. Carefully. That's no Jedi artifact. It's Sith. Ancient Sith. From before even the rule of. 2. I acquired it from a tomb. Raider who explored Korriban's deepest vaults. It contains teachings so dark, so corrupting, that even I haven't dared to open it." But the holocron was already opening in Spawn's hands, responding to the necroplasm's darkness. A holographic figure materialized above it, robed, masked, its form flickering and ancient. When it spoke, the language was incomprehensible, but the meaning burned directly into Spawn's mind. At last, something worthy. Not force, not living, not dead. Perfect. Spawn crushed the holocron with necroplasmic force, shattering it before the voice could continue. The presence vanished, but its echo remained. A whisper at the edge of consciousness. Gracchus stared. That holocron was worth 1,000,000 credits. "It was poison," Spawn corrected. "I've heard enough demons whispering promises. I don't need more." But the damage was done. The holocron's activation had sent a signal through the Force, a flare of dark side energy so potent that every Force-sensitive being on Coruscant felt it. And somewhere in the Imperial Palace, Vader's hunt shifted from measured investigation to immediate action. The Dark Lord of the Sith was coming, and Hell's Knight would finally meet the Empire's fist. Vader descended into Coruscant's underworld aboard a personal shuttle, accompanied by a full platoon of his finest. Stormtroopers, and the chastened. Seventh sister. The Inquisitor kept her distance, her humiliation still fresh, her ribs still aching despite back to treatment. She'd reported everything, the chains, the cape, the absolute control. Spawn demonstrated over his dark powers, but words couldn't capture what she'd felt in that moment. The certainty that she'd been measured and found wanting. You will remain with the troops, Vader commanded as the shuttle descended through layers of city. I will face this being alone. My lord, protocol dictates. Protocol is for those who face conventional threats. Vader's mask turned toward her, impassive and terrible. This is not conventional. Your presence would be a liability. The seventh sister swallowed her pride and nodded. She'd seen Vader fight, truly fight, only twice in her service. Both times, entire Jedi enclaves had been reduced to corpses and ash. If the Dark Lord deemed this threat worthy of personal attention, she would not argue. The shuttle touched down on a reinforced landing platform 3 levels above Gracchus's palace. Vader emerged into the polluted air, cape billowing, his presence in the Force like a black hole that consumed light. The stormtroopers formed a perimeter, weapons ready, but Vader walked forward alone, each step deliberate, inexorable. He could feel the being now, that foreign darkness that had humiliated his Inquisitor and stolen Imperial property. It wasn't hiding, couldn't hide, not with the dark side resonating around it like an echo chamber. Vader followed that resonance downward, through abandoned industrial sectors, through territories claimed by gang warfare and desperation. The dark side whispered secrets as he walked. This being was old, not in years, but in violence. It had killed so many times that death itself clung to it like a second skin. And beneath that death, beneath the darkness, Vader sensed something unexpected. Honor, restraint, a code of conduct that limited when and how it killed, that made it more dangerous than mindless malevolence. Creatures with principles were unpredictable, capable of unexpected choices. The Emperor had taught him that lesson through pain and manipulation. Honorable beings were harder to control. Vader reached Gracchus's palace and didn't bother with subtlety. The Force surged at his command, and the main doors exploded inward, durasteel torn from hinges. Alarms wailed, guards scrambled for weapons, and Vader walked through the chaos like a force of nature, his lightsaber igniting with a snap hiss that cut through the noise. The crimson blade carved through Gamorrean guards who were too slow or too stupid to flee. Weequay mercenaries fired blasters, and Vader deflected every bolt with casual precision, redirecting them back into their sources. A Wookiee slave, half-mad with pain and captivity, charged him with nothing but rage and claws. Vader killed it without hesitation. Mercy was weakness. He reached the throne room to find it empty except for Gracchus himself, the massive hut sitting calmly on his platform, surrounded by wealth and power that meant nothing in the face of Vader's presence. Lord Vader, Gracchus rumbled in accented basic, his Huttese translator collar providing smooth conversion. To what do I owe this destructive visit? You harbored the intruder, Vader stated, his mechanical voice devoid of inflection. You aided it after it stole Imperial property. That is treason. This Vader would be different. The Dark Lord entered through the facility's main doors. Lightsaber ignited, casting crimson light across rusted machinery. His presence filled the entire space, oppressive and absolute. When he spoke, his voice echoed with mechanical distortion and raw authority. You have stolen from the Empire. You have assaulted Imperial personnel. You will surrender immediately or be destroyed. Spawn stepped from the shadows, cape spreading, chains rattling. I don't surrender. Not to empires, not to demons, not to gods. If you want me, you'll have to take me. Vader studied him through the mask's optical sensors, seeing beyond mere physical appearance. The Force showed him layers, death, resurrection, centuries of violence. And beneath it all, something that burned with stubborn, unbreakable will. This being had been broken before and refused to stay broken. Vader understood that intimately. You wield darkness without the Force, Vader observed. Impossible, yet you exist. The Emperor wishes to study you. Come peacefully, and you will be treated with respect befitting your power. I've heard that speech before, Spawn replied. Different words, same meaning. You want to chain me, use me, control me. His eyes blazed brighter. I broke Hell's chains. I'll break yours too. Then you choose death. Vader attacked with speed that defied his massive frame, the Force propelling him forward. Lightsaber carving a crimson arc toward Spawn's torso. The plasma blade would cut through anything, flesh, metal, stone, with equal ease. It met necroplasmic chains, and sparks exploded across the facility. Spawn's chains wrapped around the lightsaber blade, and instead of being severed, they held. The necroplasm wasn't material in any conventional sense. It existed partially out of phase with reality, in that space between matter and energy where physics broke down. The lightsaber's plasma tried to cut it, but there was nothing truly solid to cut. Vader's surprise lasted a fraction of a second. Then he pivoted, using the Force to yank Spawn forward while simultaneously striking with his free hand. Necroplasmic links tangled around Vader's arm, but the Dark Lord's strength was augmented by both cybernetics and the Force. He lifted Spawn bodily and slammed him into a support pillar. Durasteel crumpled. Spawn's ribs cracked. Pain flared, and the symbiote screamed in shared agony. But pain was old news. Spawn had been burned alive, torn apart, crucified on Hell's walls. He'd learned to function through agony that would shatter normal minds. His cape exploded outward, transforming into a forest of black spikes that forced Vader to leap back. The Dark Lord landed 20 meters away, lightsaber held in a defensive guard, reassessing his opponent. You feel pain, Vader noted. You can be hurt. Therefore, you can be defeated. Everyone can be hurt, Spawn countered, his voice strained but defiant. Difference is what you do after. He straightened, ribs already knitting back together. The symbiote's regeneration working overtime. I've been to hell and back. You're just another devil in a different uniform. Vader didn't respond with words. He extended his hand, and the Force became a crushing vice around Spawn's throat. The pressure was immense, calculated to snap vertebrae and collapse airways. Vader had killed Jedi Masters this way, choking the life from them while they desperately tried to counter with their own Force abilities. Spawn couldn't counter with the Force. He had something else. The dark side energy that Vader wielded, that invisible grip of telekinetic power, flowed through and around Spawn. The necroplasm drank it in, absorbed it, used it as fuel. Spawn felt his power surge, fed by Vader's attack, and he smiled behind his mask. Thanks for the recharge, Spawn rasped, chains erupting from his body in an explosion of necroplasmic fury. They came from everywhere, his back, his arms, his legs, a storm of black links that filled the air like striking serpents. Vader deflected with his lightsaber, cut through chains with precise strikes. But for every one he severed, 3 more replaced it. He retreated across the facility, his movements still controlled, still measured, but his strategy clearly shifting. This being adapted too quickly. Every attack Vader used fed it power. The Force choke had been a mistake, a rare miscalculation that Vader filed away immediately. No more telekinetic attacks. Pure physical combat would be more effective. Vader deactivated his lightsaber, and Spawn's chains whipped toward the space where he'd been standing. But the Dark Lord was already moving, Force-enhanced speed carrying him up to a higher platform. He raised both hands, and machinery began to tear itself from the walls. Massive generators, weighing tons, ripped free and hurtled toward Spawn with killing velocity. The Hellspawn's cape spread wide, caught the first generator, redirected it into the second, created a collision of metal and energy that lit the facility like a dying sun. Through the explosion, Spawn launched himself upward, using chains as grappling lines, swinging between platforms with acrobatic precision that his military training had never included. The symbiote enhanced everything: reflexes, strength, awareness, making him more than human, more than alive. He landed on Vader's platform, and they fought hand to hand. Vader's cybernetic strength was immense, each punch capable of shattering bone. But Spawn's necroplasmic body didn't break conventionally. It absorbed impacts, redistributed force, regenerated damage faster than it could accumulate. They traded blows that would have killed normal beings. Fists meeting with sounds like thunder, neither giving ground. Vader caught Spawn's wrist, twisted, attempting to break the arm. The limbs stretched impossibly, the symbiote flowing. And Spawn's other hand manifested claws that raked across Vader's chest plate. Sparks flew as necroplasm met reinforced armor, scoring deep gouges in the black durasteel. For the first time in years, Vader felt something close to excitement. This opponent was worthy, dangerous, the kind of challenge that reminded him he was still a warrior, not just the Emperor's attack dog. They broke apart, both breathing hard, Vader's respirators cycling faster, Spawn's symbiote pulsing with exertion. The facility around them was wrecked. Platforms collapsed, machinery destroyed, fires burning in corners where blaster packs had exploded. Impressive, Vader admitted, reigniting his lightsaber. Few have survived this long. But survival is not victory. You grow tired. Your power has limits. Mine does not. It was true. Spawn could feel his reserves depleting, despite feeding on the dark side energy. This fight was costing him more than any battle since his resurrection. Vader was relentless, skilled, and completely committed to his purpose. There would be no mercy, no negotiation, only victory or death. And Spawn had already died once. He wasn't eager to repeat the experience. "You're right," Spawn said, his voice dropping to something cold and final. "This ends now." He reached deep into himself, into the core where necroplasm and soul intertwined, and pulled on power he'd been restraining. The counter in his mind flickered, ticked down rapidly, but the surge was worth it. Darkness exploded from his body, not necroplasm alone, but something deeper, the essence of hell itself, channeled through a being that had refused to stay damned. The facility shook. Lights exploded, and for just a moment, even Vader felt something he'd almost forgotten. Fear. Spawn's form transformed, growing, the symbiote expanding into something monstrous. His cape became wings of pure darkness. His chains multiplied into hundreds, writhing like Medusa's hair. His eyes blazed with hellfire that had burned in pits older than galaxies. This was Spawn unrestrained. Spawn as Hell's general. Spawn as the thing that made demons hesitate. Vader didn't hesitate. He charged, lightsaber raised, the force flooding through him, drawing on years of rage and pain and loss. Two beings of absolute darkness collided in the heart of Coruscant's underworld, and the shockwave shattered machinery 3 levels deep. The fight that followed would never be recorded in Imperial archives. No censors survived to capture it. No witnesses lived to describe it. Only two beings knew what happened in those final moments. When Hell's Knight met the Sith Lord in absolute, unrestrained combat. And when the dust settled, both were still standing. Spawn had returned to normal form, cape tattered, chains retracted, breathing hard. Vader stood opposite, armor scorched, respirator damaged but functional, lightsaber still ignited but held low. They stared at each other across the wrecked facility. Two warriors who'd reached the same conclusion simultaneously. Neither could win this fight. Not today. Not like this. "We are matched," Vader said finally, his voice strained by damaged respirator systems. "Rare. Very rare." "Yeah," Spawn agreed, his own voice rough. "Looks like we're both too stubborn to die." Vader deactivated his lightsaber. "Not surrender, acknowledgement. The Emperor will not cease his pursuit. You cannot hide from the Empire." "I'm not hiding. I'm just choosing my battles." Spawn turned toward the shadows. "Tell your Emperor I'm not his enemy unless he makes me one. I don't want his empire. I just want to be left alone. That is not an option. You exist. Therefore, you are a threat. Then I guess we'll do this again. Spawn's form began to fade into darkness, the symbiote pulling him into shadows that shouldn't exist. Next time, bring friends. You'll need them. He vanished, and even Vader's force senses couldn't track where he'd gone. The Dark Lord stood alone in the ruins, contemplating what had just occurred. He'd fought this being to a standstill, something that happened, perhaps once a decade, and both had survived through mutual recognition of futility. The Emperor would not be pleased, but Vader had learned something valuable. This Spawn was powerful, yes, but also isolated, alone, fighting without allies or purpose beyond survival. That was a weakness, one that could be exploited. If you couldn't defeat an enemy, you found another use for them. Vader activated his comlink. Seventh Sister, prepare the shuttle, and inform the Emperor that negotiations may prove more effective than force. High above, in the Imperial Palace, Palpatine smiled at the report. A being that could fight Vader to a draw was exactly what he'd hoped for. Such power, properly controlled, properly corrupted, could serve the Empire in ways even Vader couldn't. And corruption was the Emperor's specialty. Spawn retreated deep into Coruscant's forgotten places, to levels so far below the surface that even criminals avoided them. Level 5127A, designation that hadn't appeared on official maps in 3 centuries. Here, the city's original foundations remained. Pre-Republic structures built by species long extinct or scattered. The air was thick with fungal growths that fed on leaked chemicals, and the only light came from bioluminescent organisms that had evolved in perpetual darkness. It was here, in a chamber that might once have been a temple or a tomb, that Spawn collapsed. The fight with Vader had cost him more than he'd admitted. His power reserves were critically low, the counter in his mind flashing warnings he couldn't ignore. The symbiote was exhausted, its regenerative abilities pushed to their limit. Ribs were still healing. Internal damage from Vader's force attacks created pain that even his supernatural resilience couldn't completely suppress. He sat against a wall carved with alien glyphs, cape wrapped around him, and faced an uncomfortable truth. He was vulnerable here. Without Hell's direct connection, without the necroplasm's full power, he was operating on borrowed time and stolen energy. And that stolen energy came from the dark side. Every time he drew on it, he felt that seductive pull, that promise of unlimited power if he just stopped resisting and embraced it fully. The Force wasn't hell, but it functioned similarly, offering strength in exchange for corruption, promising freedom while forging chains. Spawn had spent years fighting to reclaim his humanity after Hell's resurrection. He wouldn't surrender it again, not even to survive in this alien galaxy. But survival demanded power, and power here meant the dark side. The red Sith holocron's fragments lay scattered beside him, destroyed but not completely inert. Even broken, they pulsed with dark energy, whispering promises in languages he shouldn't understand but somehow did. Knowledge, techniques, ways to channel the dark side without being consumed by it. Lies, probably. The same lies demons had told him. But what if they weren't? Spawn picked up a fragment, feeling its warmth, its hunger. The ancient Sith whose knowledge it contained had been powerful enough that even the Hutt feared opening it. That kind of power didn't come free. But if he could learn to use the dark side the way he used necroplasm as a tool rather than a master, maybe he could stabilize his position in this galaxy. Bad idea, he muttered to himself. Really, really bad idea. But he'd made worse decisions. Trusting Wynn, believing in the CIA, accepting Malbolgia's deal in the first place. The fragment pulsed in his hand, responding to his indecision, his desperation. And in that moment of weakness, knowledge flooded into his mind, not gentle instruction, but violent invasion. Sith teachings carved themselves into his consciousness. Techniques for channeling rage and pain. Methods for drawing power from suffering. Philosophies that justified domination and control. Spawn screamed, trying to reject it. But the knowledge was already there, embedded like shrapnel in his thoughts. He dropped the fragment, but the damage was done. The symbiote reacted immediately, absorbing the Sith knowledge, integrating it with necroplasmic abilities. New possibilities opened, ways to manifest his power that he'd never considered. Combinations of Hell's darkness and the Force's malevolence that created something uniquely terrible. And through it all, he felt something watching. Not Vader, not the Emperor. Something older, something fundamental to the dark side itself. The cosmic darkness that permeated this galaxy. Curious about the foreign corruption that had invaded its domain, it offered him a deal. Not in words, in pure understanding. Use the dark side, and it would sustain him. Draw on suffering and death, and it would ensure his survival. Embrace its philosophy, and he would never be powerless again. All it asked in return was that he stop fighting what he was. Stop pretending he could be anything other than darkness. Spawn's answer was a snarl of defiance. I've heard this pitch before. Different sales rep, same scam. I'm not buying. But refusing didn't make the offer disappear. It hung in his consciousness, patient and inevitable, waiting for the moment when desperation would overcome principle. The dark side was good at waiting. 3 levels above, in a command center established specifically for this hunt. The seventh sister monitored sensor arrays and informant networks. Vader had withdrawn to the Imperial Palace to report to the Emperor, leaving her to coordinate the search. It was grunt work beneath an Inquisitor's station. But after her humiliation, she welcomed the chance to prove her value. The screens showed nothing useful. Spawn had disappeared so completely that even their most sensitive dark side tracking systems registered only echoes, afterimages of power that led nowhere. He's shielding himself somehow, she muttered, frustrated. Using techniques I've never seen. Perhaps because they are not techniques, came a voice from the doorway. The Grand Inquisitor entered, his gaunt features thoughtful. What if this being doesn't understand the Force well enough to shield properly? But his very nature makes him difficult to track. His nature? He is death animated. Not undead in any conventional sense, something more fundamental. Death given will and purpose. The Grand Inquisitor studied the sensor readouts. The Force flows through living things. What if he exists in the spaces between life and death, where the Force's touch is uncertain? It was an unsettling thought. The Inquisitorius had hunted Force sensitives for years, relying on their connection to the Force to betray them. If Spawn could exist outside that connection while still drawing power from it, he was nearly untrackable. Lord Vader fought him to a standstill. The seventh sister said quietly, I've never seen anyone do that and survive. Nor have I. The Grand Inquisitor's expression was unreadable, which is why the Emperor has ordered a change in strategy. We are no longer trying to capture this being. Then what? We're going to give him a reason to come to us. In the Rebel Alliance's hidden cell on Coruscant, a network of safe houses and sympathizers, operating under the Empire's very nose, word spread of the disturbance in the lower levels. Reports were fragmentary, contradictory, but consistent on key points. Something had fought Vader and survived. Something powerful enough to make the Inquisitorius hunt in force. Saw Gerrera's representative, a scarred Twi'lek named Numa, brought the intelligence to her cell's leader, a former senator named Nadia Turel, who'd abandoned the Empire's corrupt government to join the rebellion. If this being fought Vader and lived, we need to make contact, Numa insisted. That kind of power could turn the tide. Or destroy us, Nadia countered. She was cautious by nature, having survived 3 Imperial purges through careful planning. We don't know its motivations. It could be a Sith apprentice Vader's testing, or some weapon that escaped Imperial control. The reports say it's helping people, breaking up slave rings, stopping enforcers. Numa pulled up grainy security footage, showing a crimson-caped figure scattering stormtroopers. That doesn't sound like Sith behavior. Nadia studied the footage, her tactical mind analyzing every frame. The being fought with brutal efficiency, but it hadn't killed anyone in this particular engagement. Broken bones, unconsciousness, but no deaths. That suggested restraint, possibly even principles. All right, she decided. Make contact. Carefully. Find out what it wants, what it's fighting for. If there's any chance of alliance. And if it refuses, then we stay far away and hope it stays neutral. The last thing we need is that power turned against us. Numa nodded and departed to begin the search. Finding Spawn would be nearly impossible. The lower levels were a maze, where even the Empire's resources struggled, but the rebellion had one advantage. They knew those levels intimately, having hidden in them for years. If Spawn wanted to stay hidden, he'd be using the same routes, the same forgotten spaces. They'd find him eventually. The question was whether he'd see them as allies or obstacles. Deep in his sanctuary, Spawn felt his power slowly regenerating, the dark side energy permeating. Coruscant's lower levels fed him whether he wanted it or not. Every death, every act of violence, every moment of suffering within several levels resonated through the necroplasm. It was passive feeding, not active corruption, but the distinction felt increasingly meaningless. He was changing, adapting, becoming something that belonged to this galaxy rather than his original world. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, it just felt inevitable. His military training kicked in, forcing him to think tactically rather than philosophically. He'd made enemies, the Empire, specifically Vader, and possibly this Emperor everyone feared. He needed allies, resources, intelligence about this galaxy's power structures. Gracchus was useful but ultimately self-serving. He needed something more reliable. The rebels, maybe, if they actually existed and weren't just propaganda invention. Organizations fighting fascist. Empires usually had moral blind spots that Spawn could exploit. They needed power more than they needed clean consciences. He could work with that. But first, he needed to stabilize his power situation. The Sith fragment's knowledge lingered in his mind, showing him techniques that made the necroplasms integration with the dark side more efficient. He could resist using them, but for how long? Pride didn't stop bullets. Principles didn't win fights against Sith lords. Spawn stood, testing his body. Ribs healed. Internal damage repaired. The symbiote had recovered most of its functionality. He was operational again, ready for whatever came next. What came next was an explosion. The chamber's entrance detonated inward. Durasteel and stone blasted to fragments by shaped charges. Stormtroopers poured through the breach. Weapons raised, moving with professional precision. Behind them came someone Spawn recognized from the garrison fight, the fifth brother. His massive frame filling the doorway. Double-bladed lightsaber spinning. Surrender, the fifth brother commanded. The Emperor offers terms. Refuse, and we bury you in this tomb. Spawn's cape spread, chains materialized, and his voice dropped to that hollow register that made even hardened soldiers flinch. You brought 20 men to my home. That's not an arrest. That's suicide. The fifth brother smiled, revealing filed teeth. We didn't come to arrest you. Behind the stormtroopers, hidden in the passage, something else moved. Spawn felt it through the dark. Sighed, a presence that made his necroplasm recoil instinctively. Not Vader. Not the Emperor. Something older. Something that existed purely in the Force. Bound to no physical form. A Sith specter. An echo of ancient evil that the Empire had somehow contained and weaponized. We came to test you. The fifth brother continued. The Emperor wishes to know if you're worth recruiting. Survive this, and an audience will be arranged. Fail, and you'll serve the Empire as a cautionary tale. The specter manifested, a robed figure of translucent darkness. Its face a skull wreathed in dark side energy. It spoke in that same incomprehensible language the holocron had used. Words that bypassed hearing and carved meaning directly into consciousness. Pretender. False darkness. You wear death-like costume. I am death eternal. Spawn recognized the challenge for what it was, theological as much as physical. This thing believed itself superior because it had mastered the dark side completely, surrendering everything human to become pure malevolent force. I've met your type, Spawn replied, his own darkness rising to meet the challenge. Demons who forgot they used to be people. You're not special. You're just older trash. The specter's rage exploded through the Force. A wave of pure hatred that would have driven most beings mad. Spawn felt it crash against his consciousness, trying to find purchase, trying to corrupt and destroy, and found something that had already been to hell and refused to break. The necroplasm surged. Not just his power, but the accumulated essence of every battle he'd fought, every demon he'd defeated, every time he'd chosen to remain himself despite the darkness consuming him. It was hell's power wielded by someone who'd never fully surrendered to hell's philosophy. The two darknesses collided in the ancient chamber, and Coruscant's deepest foundations trembled. The stormtroopers opened fire, but their blaster bolts were swept aside by the sheer energy of the confrontation. The fifth brother charged, lightsaber spinning, and Spawn met him with chains that had learned Sith techniques from the holocron fragments. Necroplasm wrapped around plasma blades, not severed but controlling them, redirecting them. The Spectre attacked from another angle. Dark-side lightning erupting from incorporeal hands. Pure force energy meant to burn neurons and shatter minds. Spawn's cape absorbed the lightning. The symbiote screaming in pain but holding, and redirected it back at its source. The Spectre recoiled, shocked. Nothing should be able to reflect pure force lightning without the force itself. This being was breaking fundamental rules. Your rules, Spawn snarled, pressing the attack. Not mine. His chains lashed out at the Spectre, wrapping around its incorporeal form. The Sith spirit tried to phase through them, to exist in the Force where physical matter couldn't touch it. But necroplasm existed in that same space, death given form. Matter that was also energy, physical and metaphysical simultaneously. The chains held, and Spawn pulled the Spectre close. Face to face with this ancient evil, he spoke with absolute conviction. You think darkness is your ally. You merely adopted it. I was born in it, died in it, resurrected by it. And I'm still here, still fighting, still refusing to let it own me. His eyes blazed. You're just a ghost pretending to matter. I'm the real thing. He crushed the Spectre's form with necroplasmic force, dissipating its coherence, scattering its malevolent consciousness across dimensions, where it would take decades to reform. The Sith spirit's scream echoed through the Force, a wail of defeat that every dark side practitioner on Coruscant felt like ice. Water down their spine. The fifth brother stood frozen, his confidence shattered. He'd watched a being with no Force training destroy something that had taken multiple Inquisitors working together to barely contain. This wasn't just power, it was authority over darkness itself. Leave, Spawn commanded, his voice absolute. Tell your Emperor I'm not his weapon, not his servant, not his anything. If he wants me dead, send Vader again. Otherwise, stay out of my way. The fifth brother retreated, dragging stunned stormtroopers with him. They fled the chamber, leaving Spawn alone with the aftermath of power he was only beginning to understand. He'd drawn heavily on the dark side during the fight, let it flow through him in ways the Sith fragment's knowledge had taught him. It had felt right, natural, like finding a language he'd always known but never spoken. That terrified him more than any enemy. The dark side whispered approval, satisfaction, hunger for more. It had tasted his potential and wanted everything he could give. Spawn crushed those whispers through sheer will, but he knew the truth. He was running out of ways to refuse. Every fight forced him deeper into the dark side's embrace. Every victory proved its usefulness. Eventually, he'd stop resisting. And when that happened, what would he become? High above, in the Imperial Palace, the Emperor listened to the fifth brother's report with barely contained satisfaction. Perfect. The being was powerful, adaptable, and increasingly dependent on the dark side. Exactly what Palpatine had hoped for. Invite him, the Emperor commanded. Not as prisoner, as guest. Let us see if corruption requires chains, or if it works best through whispered temptation. Vader stood silent in the corner, recognizing his master's strategy. The Emperor didn't break powerful beings. Through force, he twisted them, through their own choices until they couldn't distinguish corruption from necessity. And this Spawn, for all his power, was making the same mistakes young Anakin Skywalker had made decades ago. Believing he could use darkness as a tool, believing his will was strong enough to resist. They were always wrong. The invitation arrived through an unlikely messenger, a protocol droid, ancient and battered, that somehow navigated the lower levels to find Spawn's new hiding place. It carried a holographic projector that activated the moment it detected his presence, displaying a message from the Emperor himself. Palpatine's holographic form was diplomatically pleasant, his voice smooth as poisoned honey. Greetings, extraordinary visitor. I am Emperor Palpatine, sovereign of this galaxy. You have demonstrated remarkable power and resilience. Rather than continue this wasteful conflict, I propose a meeting. The Imperial Palace, 3 days hence, under flag of diplomatic immunity. Come armed if you wish. Leave when you choose. I merely wish to understand what you are and what you seek in my domain. The hologram flickered out, leaving Spawn alone with a decision that could define his survival in this galaxy. It was obviously a trap. Every instinct screamed that walking into the Emperor's stronghold was suicide. Palpatine was the apex predator here, the being who'd orchestrated the Jedi genocide and commanded someone as dangerous as Vader. Meeting him on his own ground violated every tactical principle Spawn had learned. But intelligence gathering required risks, and Spawn needed to understand what he was truly facing. This emperor controlled millions of worlds, commanded armies that numbered in the trillions, and wielded power that made entire species kneel. If Spawn was going to survive here, or find a way home, he needed to know his enemy. Besides, the emperor had promised diplomatic immunity. Probably a lie, but an interesting one. It suggested Palpatine wanted something more than just Spawn's capture or death. That created negotiating space, however narrow. Spawn had 3 days to prepare. He spent them learning. Numa found him on level 2000, in a defunct factory where the rebellion maintained a weapons cache. She tracked him through informants and sensor echoes. A week of careful investigation that nearly got her killed twice. When she finally stood before him, the Twi'lek warrior kept her hands visible and her voice steady. "We've been looking for you," she said in basic, her Lekka twitching with nervousness. "The rebellion. We want to help." Spawn studied her from the shadows. Cape wrapped tight, chains retracted. She was armed, blaster pistol, vibroblade, thermal detonator, but her weapons were holstered. Not surrender, but an attempt at peace. "Help how?" His voice made her flinch, but she held her ground. "Last I checked, your rebellion was getting crushed across the galaxy." "We're surviving," Numa corrected. "Striking where we can, building resistance, keeping hope alive. But you're right, we're outgunned, outmanned, desperate." She stepped closer, courage overriding fear. "That's why we need allies, especially ones who can fight Vader to a standstill. And what do I get from this alliance?" "Information, resources, safe houses across Coruscant, medical supplies, though I'm not sure if you need them." She gestured at his form, clearly uncertain what he was. "And something more valuable, purpose. You're hunting the Empire. So are we. Together, we could actually hurt them." Spawn considered this. The rebellion represented everything he'd once fought for: resistance against tyranny, protection of the weak, standing up to overwhelming power. Before the betrayal, before hell, Al Simmons had believed in those principles. Maybe some part of him still did. But he'd also learned that righteous causes didn't stay righteous. Once they tasted power, the CIA had started with noble intentions too. "I'm not joining your war," Spawn said finally. "But I'll trade information. You tell me about the Empire's structure, the Emperor's capabilities, what I'm walking into when I meet him. I'll tell you how to hurt facilities he actually cares about." Numa's eyes widened. "You're meeting the Emperor? That's suicide." "Probably. But I need to see what I'm really up against." He emerged from the shadows fully, letting her see the chains, the cape, the inhuman eyes. "You scared yet?" "Terrified," she admitted, "but also hopeful. Something that scares the Empire scares me less." She pulled out a datapad, calling up files. "All right, let's talk about Emperor Palpatine. But I'm warning you, the more you learn about him, the more you'll understand why meeting him is the worst idea you've ever had." She was right. Over the next 2 hours, Numa painted a picture of a being so thoroughly steeped in manipulation and dark power that even Spawn, who'd negotiated with Hell's generals, felt genuine unease. Palpatine wasn't just powerful in the Force. He was a master of corruption, turning beings to his service through their own choices, their own weaknesses. "He turned Anakin Skywalker," Numa explained quietly. "The Chosen One, the Jedi's greatest hero, their most powerful knight. He twisted him into Darth Vader through promises of saving his wife. Anakin thought he was preventing her death. Instead, he caused it and became the Emperor's slave." Spawn absorbed this, understanding the parallel instantly. He'd made his deal with Malbolgia for similar reasons: to see wander again, to have 5 more minutes with the woman he loved. That desperation had damned him. Palpatine would try the same approach. Find the weakness, exploit it, offer a solution that was actually a trap. "What's my weakness?" Spawn asked. "What will he use against me?" Numa studied him thoughtfully. "I don't know you well enough to say, but from what I've heard, you help people. Fight slavers, protect the vulnerable. That's not darkness. Acting, that's someone with principles." She met his inhuman gaze. "He'll use that. Make you think serving the Empire is the only way to save people. Or he'll threaten innocence to force your compliance. Or he'll offer you power enough to protect everyone, if you just accept his guidance." Classic manipulation. Spawn had seen it in Hell, in the CIA, in every corrupt organization that dressed tyranny in noble language. Thanks for the warning, Spawn said. Now let me give you something useful in return. He spent the next hour detailing Imperial facilities he'd scouted during his time in the lower levels. Weapons depots with inadequate security. Power distribution nodes that, if destroyed, would black out entire governmental sectors. Patrol patterns that created exploitable gaps. Tactical intelligence that could save rebel lives and hurt the Empire's infrastructure. Numa recorded everything, her expression shifting from cautious hope to genuine excitement. This was intelligence the rebellion would kill for, literally. Why are you giving us this? She asked when he finished. You said you weren't joining our war. I'm not, Spawn confirmed. But the Empire made an enemy when they decided I was a threat. You want to hurt them? Good. Just don't expect me to march under your banners or follow your orders. I fight my way, my terms. That's more than we had yesterday. Numa stood, holstering her datapad. The offer stands. Anytime you need help, contact us through the frequency I'm about to give you. We take care of our own, even the scary ones. She transmitted the encrypted channel and departed, leaving Spawn alone with his thoughts and preparations. 2 days later, Spawn received another visitor. This one didn't announce herself, simply appeared in his current sanctuary, a maintenance tunnel near the industrial sectors. She wore dark robes, her face hidden by a hood, but her presence in the Force was obvious even to Spawn's limited sensitivity. I am not your enemy, she said quickly, hands visible and empty. Though I understand if you don't believe that. Spawn's chains materialized, ready. You're with the Empire. I was. Years ago. She lowered her hood, revealing a scarred human face, middle-aged, with eyes that carried too much pain. My name is Array. I was once a Jedi Knight. I survived Order 66, watched my friends die, and spent years hiding. The Inquisitors eventually found me. They tried to turn me to the dark side, but I escaped before the corruption took hold completely. Why are you here? Because you're about to make the same mistake. I almost did. Array stepped closer, her presence radiating sincerity mixed with desperation. The Emperor will offer you everything you want. Power, purpose, protection. He's a master at finding what you need and promising to provide it. But it's all lies wrapped around a core of slavery. I know how deals with evil work, Spawn said darkly. I've made them before. Then you know you can't win by playing his game. The moment you start negotiating with Palpatine, you've already lost. He doesn't need to defeat you, just convince you that serving him is the rational choice. Her Force presence flared with emphasis. The dark side isn't just power. It's corruption. The more you use it, the more it changes you until you can't remember who you were before. Spawn felt the truth of her words resonate with his own experience. The Sith fragment's knowledge had already altered his thinking, made tactics involving suffering and domination feel natural rather than abhorrent. Every fight pushed him further down that path. If I don't use the dark side, I can't survive here, Spawn admitted. My power runs on darkness. In my world, that was hell's energy. Here, it's the Force. I don't have a choice. There's always a choice, Array insisted. The Jedi taught that the Force has two aspects, light and dark, yes, but also the living force that simply exists without moral alignment. If your power is truly neutral, drawn from death rather than evil, then maybe you can channel the Force without letting it corrupt you. The Jedi are dead. Vader killed them all. Most of us, yes. But the philosophy remains true. The dark side offers quick power at the cost of your soul. The light side requires discipline and sacrifice but preserves who you are. She reached out, not touching but offering connection. I can teach you techniques, not Jedi methods. I know you're no Force user, but ways to resist corruption, to use power without letting power use you. Spawn studied her, searching for deception. He found only earnest desperation. A woman who'd lost everything trying to save someone else from the same fate. I meet the Emperor tomorrow, Spawn said. Whatever you're teaching, we don't have time. Then I'll teach you the most important lesson. Array's eyes burned with intensity. When Palpatine offers you what you want, remember this. Every Sith Lord was once someone who thought they could control the darkness. They were all wrong. The darkness doesn't serve, it consumes. If you accept his bargain, you won't become his weapon. You'll become his victim, and you'll spend eternity trying to remember why you agreed to it in the first place. She left after that, disappearing into the lower levels maze, leaving Spawn with warnings that echoed too closely to his own history. He'd ignored similar warnings before making his deal with Malbolgia. Wanda had begged him not to take the CIA's Black Ops assignment. His instincts had screamed that Chapel was setting him up. He'd ignored all of it because he believed he was strong enough, smart enough, too valuable to be discarded. He'd been wrong every time. The day of the meeting arrived. Spawn dressed in his full regalia, cape, chains, mask fully formed into its most inhuman configuration. If the Emperor wanted to see what he was, he'd show him the truth. No disguises, no pretense at humanity. The invitation had specified a landing platform on the palace's mid-level, accessible without passing through heavy security. Diplomatic courtesy, supposedly. Spawn arrived via rooftop and shadow walking. The symbiote's unstable teleportation finally reliable enough for short jumps. The platform was empty except for a single figure, not Vader, not guards, but a woman in elegant senatorial robes. She was beautiful in a calculated way, her presence radiating practiced charm rather than genuine warmth. "Welcome," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I am Mara Jade, the Emperor's hand. I'll escort you to the audience chamber. Please, follow me." Spawn recognized a killer hiding behind civilization. She carried no visible weapons, but her movements had that edge professionals developed through combat experience. Force-sensitive, too. He could feel the dark side clinging to her like perfume. "How many ways are you supposed to kill me if things go wrong?" Spawn asked conversationally. Mara's smile became genuine for a moment. 17, but I'm creative. I'd probably improvise a few more." She gestured toward the palace entrance. "Don't worry. The Emperor genuinely wishes to talk. Killing you would be wasteful, and my master wastes nothing." They walked through corridors of obsidian and durasteel, past chambers where Spawn could sense other presences. Guards, bureaucrats, force sensitives hidden inside rooms. The palace was a fortress pretending to be an administrative building, every aesthetic choice serving strategic purpose. Finally, they reached the throne room. It was smaller than Spawn expected, almost intimate. The Emperor sat on a throne of black stone, his face hidden partially by his hood, his presence in the Force like staring into a collapsed star, infinite density, infinite darkness, pulling everything toward it. Vader stood to his right, silent and imposing. Other figures lined the walls, royal guards in crimson armor, advisors whose faces Spawn didn't recognize. And one he did, the Grand Inquisitor, watching with barely concealed curiosity. "Ah," Emperor Palpatine said, his voice warm despite the cold power beneath it. "The Wanderer, the dead man walking, the thing that should not exist, yet persists with admirable stubbornness." He leaned forward slightly. "Welcome to my domain. I have such wonders to show you." Spawn stood at the chamber's center, surrounded by power that could annihilate him, and faced the being who'd corrupted an entire galaxy. "Let's talk," Spawn said, and the negotiation for his soul began. "You intrigue me," Palpatine began, his voice conversational, almost grandfatherly. "A being who wields darkness without the Force, who has died and returned, who fights Sith Lords to a standstill, yet shows restraint when killing would be easier. You are a contradiction, and I find contradictions illuminating." Spawn remained silent, watching, analyzing. The Emperor's presence was overwhelming, centuries of accumulated dark side power, compressed into one frail-looking human form. But beneath the power, Spawn recognized something familiar: the bureaucrat's smile, the politician's tone. Malbolgia had used similar approaches, dressing manipulation in reasonable language. "You wish to know my purpose," Spawn said finally. "Simple. I didn't choose to be here. I want to survive, find a way home if possible, and be left alone. Your empire attacked me first." "A misunderstanding." Palpatine waved dismissively. "My inquisitors are zealous. They see dark power and assume threat. But you and I, we understand that darkness is simply a tool, yes? Not inherently evil, merely efficient." He smiled beneath his hood. "I sense you've already begun to appreciate this galaxy's dark side. It feeds you, sustains you. You've learned to draw on suffering and death, just as the Sith do." The observation was too accurate. Spawn kept his expression neutral, but internally he recognized the trap being set. Admit using the dark side, and Palpatine would frame it as existing corruption. Deny it, and the Emperor would prove him a liar. I use what's available, Spawn said carefully. Doesn't mean I serve it. Of course not. Palpatine agreed, his tone understanding. Just as Lord Vader here uses the dark side without being enslaved by it. We are masters of our power, not servants to abstract philosophy. He gestured to Vader, who remained statue still. You fought him. Tell me, did you sense a being consumed by darkness, or a warrior wielding it with discipline and purpose? Spawn glanced at Vader, reading the Dark Lord's posture. There was control there, yes, but also chains. Vader's armor wasn't just life support, it was a prison, keeping him dependent on the Emperor's resources, his mercy. The dark side hadn't freed Vader. It had merely changed his masters. I sensed a slave, Spawn said bluntly. Powerful, dangerous, but still following orders. The throne room's temperature seemed to drop. Vader's mechanical breathing hitched, and the royal guards tensed. But Palpatine laughed, genuinely amused. Honesty. How refreshing. Yes, Lord Vader serves me, as is appropriate. I saved him from death, gave him purpose after tragedy destroyed his life. Is that slavery, or is it gratitude properly expressed? Palpatine's eyes gleamed from beneath his hood. But perhaps you misunderstand the nature of service. When goals align, when master and apprentice both benefit from cooperation, is it truly bondage? Or is it partnership? Partnerships have equals, Spawn countered. This doesn't look equal, because you see only the surface. Palpatine stood, moving with surprising grace for someone who appeared so elderly. He descended from the throne, approaching Spawn directly. Vader shifted slightly, ready to intervene, but the Emperor waved him back. Palpatine stopped 3 meters from Spawn, close enough that his presence in the Force was almost physical pressure. Lord Vader commands fleets, destroys worlds, shapes galactic policy. He is second only to me in power and authority. What slavery grants such influence? What bondage offers such purpose? The kind where you can't leave, Spawn replied. The kind where your chains are made of benefits you can't afford to lose. Palpatine's smile widened. You speak from experience. Tell me, what chains do you wear? What binds a being who has already died and escaped hell itself? The question struck deeper than Spawn wanted to admit. He'd escaped hell's obvious chains, Malbolgia's direct control, the counter that limited his power, but had he truly escaped? He still drew on darkness, still killed when necessary, still defined himself by the damnation. He'd survived rather than the life he'd lost. I ask, Palpatine continued, sensing advantage. Because I can break those chains. Your power here is unstable, dependent on this galaxy's dark side. But what if I taught you to harness it properly? Not as a desperate scavenger feeding on scraps, but as a master who commands darkness absolutely. He extended one withered hand. I offer knowledge. Techniques the Sith perfected over millennia for channeling. Dark power without limitation. No more exhaustion after battle. No more wondering if your reserves will fail at a critical moment. True mastery. In exchange for what? Service, of course, but not slavery. Palpatine's voice became reasonable, almost kind. My empire spans millions of worlds. Maintaining order requires specialists. Lord Vader handles military threats and force sensitives. But there are other problems. Criminal syndicates that grow too powerful. Rebel cells that hide where conventional forces cannot reach. Beings and organizations that require a more subtle approach. You want me to be your assassin. I want you to continue doing what you already do, fighting those who threaten order and prey on the weak, but with imperial resources, supporting you, access to intelligence networks, transportation across the galaxy, medical facilities, should you require them, and most importantly, protection. Palpatine's eyes hardened slightly. You have made enemies simply by existing. The criminal underworld fears you. The rebellion will eventually try to manipulate you. Without allies, you will be ground down by attrition. It was a compelling argument, Spawn had to admit. Everything Palpatine offered would solve immediate problems. The knowledge would stabilize his power. The resources would make survival easier. The protection would buy him time to find a way home. All he had to do was become the Empire's weapon. I've heard this pitch, Spawn said quietly. Different universe, different demon, same deal. Serve us, and we'll give you power. Purpose, everything you want. Then one day you wake up and realize you've become the thing you swore to fight. But you misunderstand the fundamental difference, Palpatine countered. Your previous bargain was made from desperation, yes? A moment of weakness where you had no leverage. No choice but to accept whatever terms were offered. Here, now, you negotiate from strength. You have proven yourself worthy. You have options. He spread his hands. Refuse my offer, and I will let you leave. Continue your struggle alone, drawing on scraps of dark side energy. Always one misstep from exhaustion. Or accept partnership, not servitude, and thrive. Vader finally spoke, his mechanical voice cutting through the throne room. The Emperor does not offer this lightly. I have served for decades and found purpose I never imagined as a Jedi. The power, the clarity, the absence of the Jedi's restricting dogma. These are gifts, not chains. Spawn studied Vader, trying to read truth beneath the armor and mask. What he sensed was complicated, genuine belief mixed with rationalization, satisfaction blended with buried rage. Vader had convinced himself his service was choice. Maybe at one point it had been, but decades of it had forged chains so strong he couldn't recognize them anymore. I need time, Spawn said finally, to think about this. Of course, Palpatine agreed easily. I am not unreasonable. Take 3 days. Explore Coruscant. Speak with whomever you wish. Gather whatever counsel you require. But understand, this offer expires. My patience has limits, and the galaxy's chaos demands. I fill positions of power with those willing to accept them. If you refuse, someone else will receive these gifts. It was a soft deadline, pressure disguised as generosity. Spawn recognized the technique. Make the target feel like they're choosing freely while steadily, limiting their options. 3 days, Spawn confirmed. He turned to leave, then paused. One question. That dark side entity you sent after me, the Sith Spectre. You knew I'd destroy it, didn't you? Palpatine's smile returned. I suspected you would prove superior, yes. It was a test, not an execution. The Spectre had become troublesome, useful for intimidating lesser beings. But its arrogance exceeded its value. You solved a problem while demonstrating capabilities I needed to understand. Efficiency is beautiful, don't you think? You sacrificed one of your own just to see what I could do. I allocated resources to gather intelligence and achieved multiple objectives simultaneously. That is leadership. Palpatine's tone hardened slightly. Sentimentality is a weakness that clouds judgment. I eliminated that weakness long ago, as you apparently have as well. You show mercy when it serves tactical purpose, but you do not hesitate to kill when necessary. We are alike in this, you and I. Spawn wanted to reject the comparison violently, to insist he was nothing like this manipulative monster. But the denial would be a lie. He had killed so many times, as a CIA operative. As Spawn, that death followed him like a shadow. He'd made cold calculations, sacrificed innocence for greater goods, committed acts that haunted his limited sleep. Maybe they were alike. That thought was more terrifying than any threat Palpatine could make. 3 days, Spawn repeated, and left the throne room. Mara Jade escorted him back to the landing platform in silence. As they walked, she spoke quietly. He sees potential in you. That's rare. Most beings who enter that throne room leave as servants or corpses. Which category are you? Both, she admitted with dark humor. I died the moment I accepted his training. The person I was before doesn't exist anymore. But the power, the purpose, it's worth the cost. You'll understand eventually. That's what everyone who makes bad deals tells themselves. She didn't argue, simply opened the door to the platform. 3 days. Use them wisely. And if you're smart, you'll accept. The Emperor rewards loyalty generously, but he destroys resistance absolutely. Spawn stepped onto the platform and Shadow walked away, leaving the Imperial Palace behind. But he couldn't shake the feeling that he was already caught in its gravity, already being pulled toward a decision he'd regret. He returned to the lower levels, to the territories where rebellion sympathizers operated. Numa found him within hours, her intelligence network impressive for a supposedly ragtag resistance. You survived, she said, relief evident. We detected Imperial activity around the palace, but couldn't confirm. What happened? Spawn told her everything. The offer, the manipulation, the 3-day deadline. Numa listened with growing horror. You can't seriously be considering it, she said when he finished. Serving the Empire? After everything they've done. He made good points, Spawn admitted. I need stability, resources, knowledge about this galaxy's power. The rebellion can't offer those things. You're barely surviving yourselves. Because we're fighting for something that matters. Numa's Leku twitched with agitation. Yes, we're outgunned. Yes, we're desperate. But we're free. We make our own choices, fight for our own principles. Join the Empire, and you'll have power but no soul. I already sold my soul once, Spawn said quietly. To see my wife again. To have 5 more minutes with her. It didn't work. Hell lied, like demons do. But the point is, I've made that choice before. I know what trading pieces of yourself costs. Then why are you even considering this? Because maybe I don't have enough left to trade, Spawn admitted. His voice hollow. Every fight here pushes me deeper into darkness. I use the dark side now, draw on it like breathing. The Sith teachings in my head feel natural. How long until I can't tell the difference between necessary evil and just evil? Numa was silent for a long moment. Then she did something unexpected. She reached out and placed her hand on his arm. The symbiote recoiled instinctively, but she held firm. The fact that you're asking that question means you haven't lost yourself. Yet, she said firmly. Monsters don't worry about becoming monsters. They just are. You're still fighting it, still questioning. That matters. Does it? What if questioning isn't enough? What if? Then you fight harder, Numa interrupted. You find people who remind you what you're fighting for. You hold on to the pieces of yourself that matter, even when it's easier to let go. Her eyes were fierce. The Emperor wants you to believe you're already lost. That accepting his offer is just acknowledging reality. That's the lie. You're only lost when you stop resisting. Spawn wanted to believe her. Wanted to think that will alone could prevent corruption. But he'd watched too many good people become monsters. Through incremental compromise. The CIA had been full of them. Agents who started with noble intentions and ended up torturing innocents because the mission required it. He'd been one of them. 3 days, Spawn said, echoing Palpatine's deadline. I'll decide in 3 days. Numa nodded, understanding she couldn't push further. Whatever you choose, remember something. The Emperor offers power. The rebellion offers purpose. Sometimes purpose is worth more. She left him alone with his thoughts and his darkness, neither of which offered comfort. The final person Spawn sought was Gracchus. The Hutt received him in his restored throne room. The damages from Vader's intrusion already repaired. Criminal empires recovered quickly when motivated by survival. You live, Gracchus rumbled, amused. The Emperor didn't kill you, which means he wants something. Let me guess, service in exchange for power. How did you know? Because that's how Palpatine operates. He doesn't destroy useful beings. He recruits them, corrupts them, turns them into extensions of his will. Gracchus's eyes gleamed. With ancient cunning. I've survived 6 regime changes, 3 galactic wars, and countless purges by understanding one principle. Powerful beings always want more power. The Emperor offers it because he knows most cannot resist. Can you? Me? I'm a criminal, not a revolutionary. I serve the Emperor when it's profitable, betray him when it's safe, and stay neutral when it's smart. That's how I've survived 7 centuries. The Hutt leaned forward. But you're not like me. You have principles, however buried. That makes you vulnerable to manipulation. Palpatine will use your desire to help people, to fight injustice, to matter. He'll convince you that serving the Empire achieves those goals. Doesn't it? Though, Spawn challenged. The Empire maintains order across millions of worlds. Stops pirates, slavers, criminals. Sure, they're fascists, but they're effective fascists. Maybe that's worth something. Gracchus laughed, a sound like grinding stone. You're already rationalizing. That's step 1. Step 2 is accepting that the ends justify the means. Step 3 is realizing you've become the very thing you fought against. But by then you're too invested to stop. The Hutt's expression became serious. I'm no moral authority, but I know corruption when I see it. You're standing at the edge. Jump, and you won't recognize yourself in a year. What's my alternative? Struggle alone until something kills me? Join a rebellion that's going to lose. Or forge your own path, Gracchus suggested. The galaxy is vast. There are places beyond Imperial reach, people who need champions. Battles worth fighting that have nothing to do with Empire versus Rebellion. You're not bound to their conflict unless you choose to be. It was the first genuinely new option anyone had presented. Not Emperor or Rebellion, but something independent. Spawn as his own force, making his own decisions, fighting his own battles. The idea was both terrifying and liberating. "I'll think about it," Spawn said. "Don't think too long," Gracchus warned. Palpatine's 3-day deadline isn't random. It's calculated to keep you off balance, prevent deep reflection. He wants you to decide while still processing his offer's appeal. Real wisdom requires more time than he's giving. Spawn left the palace with 1 day remaining before his deadline. 3 different paths before him, and no clear answer about which would lead to survival versus damnation. That night, in his sanctuary deep in Coruscant's forgotten levels, he meditated on what he'd become. The symbiote pulsed around him, the necroplasm carrying memories of every fight, every kill, every choice that had led him here. He'd died in an alley, betrayed by the government he'd served. He'd made a deal with hell to see his wife again. He'd clawed his way back from damnation, fought demons and angels, refused to let death be the end. And now, in a galaxy far from home, he was being offered the same choice again. Serve evil for power and purpose, or struggle alone with principles that might get him killed. The dark side whispered seductively, promising that accepting the Emperor's offer wasn't surrender, it was wisdom. He could serve the Empire, use its resources, and maintain his own code. He'd be the good soldier again, but with eyes open, without the naivety that got him killed before. But Spawn remembered something Cagliostro had once told him, back when he'd first returned from hell. The moment you accept that evil is necessary, you've already lost. The moment you decide you can control darkness, it's already controlling you. When morning came on his deadline's final day, Spawn knew what he had to do. The decision wouldn't save him, might actually doom him, but it was the only choice his battered conscience could accept. He returned to the Imperial Palace, ready to give the Emperor his answer. The throne room was more crowded this time. Palpatine sat on his throne as before, but now the chamber held nearly a dozen high-ranking Imperial officials, Grand Moffs in their gray uniforms, military commanders whose chest plates gleamed with medals earned through conquest. Vader stood at the Emperor's right hand, a silent monument to dark power. The Grand Inquisitor was present, along with the fifth brother and a fully recovered seventh sister. This wasn't just a meeting. It was a demonstration. Palpatine was showing his court what happened when beings of power chose, wisely or foolishly. "Ah," the Emperor said as Spawn entered, his voice carrying warmth that felt rehearsed. "You returned to us. I trust your deliberations were fruitful." Spawn walked to the chamber's center, every eye tracking his movement. The Imperial officials radiated, mixture of curiosity and contempt. Curiosity about this anomaly that had troubled their empire. Contempt for anything that didn't fit their rigid hierarchy. "I've made my decision," Spawn said, his voice echoing off obsidian walls. "Excellent." Palpatine leaned forward eagerly. "Tell me, have you chosen wisdom? Will you join us in bringing order to this chaotic galaxy?" "No." The single word dropped into silence like a stone into deep water. The Imperial officials exchanged glances. The Inquisitors tensed. Vader remained motionless, but Spawn felt his focus sharpen through the Force. Palpatine's expression didn't change, but his presence in the Force darkened, became denser. "No? You refuse my generous offer? Please, elaborate. I am curious what reasoning could lead to such poor judgment." "I've served empires before," Spawn said, keeping his voice level. "Told myself I was doing necessary work, protecting people, maintaining order. The CIA convinced me that assassination and black ops were patriotic duty. I believed it until they put a bullet in my brain and left me, bleeding in an alley." He gestured around the throne room. "This is the same deal, different uniforms. You'll use me until I'm inconvenient, then discard me. Lord Vader has served me for decades." Palpatine countered smoothly. "Do you see him discarded? I see him leashed." Spawn's gaze fixed on Vader. "That armor isn't just life support, it's control. You keep him dependent, weak enough that he needs you to survive. That's not partnership. That's ownership." Vader's mechanical breathing increased in tempo, the only sign of emotional response. But he didn't contradict Spawn's observation. Couldn't, because it was fundamentally true. "Insolent," one of the Grand Moffs spat. "You dare insult Lord Vader in the Emperor's presence?" "I'm stating facts," Spawn replied. "If you're offended by truth, that's your problem." Palpatine raised a hand, silencing the Grand Moff. His voice remained pleasant. but an edge of steel entered it. You mistake utility for bondage. Lord Vader's armor sustains him, yes, but it also augments his power. It is a gift, not a chain. Just as my offer to you is a gift. The Emperor's eyes gleamed from beneath his hood. But you reject it. You choose struggle over support, isolation over community. Tell me, do you believe this is strength? Or is it pride masquerading as principle? It's survival, Spawn said. I've been damned once by making deals with demons. Hell promised to reunite me with my wife if I served as their soldier. I agreed, desperate and stupid. Got 5 minutes in an alley 5 years later. Watched her with another man. Realized I'd traded everything for nothing. His chains rattled, manifesting slightly. Your offer is cleaner, more sophisticated, but it's the same structure. Serve us, gain power. Lose yourself in increments until you can't remember who you were. Philosophically interesting, Palpatine acknowledged, but pragmatically foolish. You have no resources, no allies, no understanding of this galaxy's politics. How long do you believe you'll survive without protection? The criminal syndicates want your power. The rebellion will try to manipulate you for their doomed cause. And my empire? He spread his hands. You become a problem I can no longer ignore. Refusing my generosity is one thing. Continuing to exist as an uncontrolled variable is another. The threat was explicit now, velvet glove removed to reveal iron fist. Accept or die. Those were the real options, and Spawn had always known it. Then I guess we have a problem, Spawn said quietly. Indeed. Palpatine's voice hardened. Lord Vader, secure our guest. He will remain here while I decide whether execution or imprisonment better serves the Empire's interests. Vader moved immediately, lightsaber igniting. The crimson blade casting hellish light across the throne room. But Spawn was already in motion. Cape spreading, chains erupting. The symbiote transforming him into the full combat form heat. Restrained during their previous fight. The Inquisitors attacked simultaneously, Grand Inquisitor from the left, Fifth Brother from the right, Seventh Sister from above. Her force-enhanced leap carrying her toward Spawn's blind spot. Coordinated assault, professional execution. The kind of teamwork that had killed Jedi Masters. Spawn's cape became a forest of black tendrils that caught the Seventh Sister. Mid-leap, slammed her into the Grand Inquisitor. Tangled both in necroplasmic matter that their lightsabers couldn't effectively cut. The Fifth Brother's double-bladed weapon met Spawn's chains, and sparks exploded across the throne room as plasma and necroplasm collided. The Imperial officials scattered, scrambling for exits. Decades of political maneuvering providing no preparation for actual combat. The Royal Guards surged forward, their force pikes crackling with energy, their crimson armor moving with surprising speed. Spawn met them like a storm. Chains wrapped around pikes, yanked guards off balance. Cape tendrils disarmed 3 simultaneously. He wasn't trying to kill, not yet, just disable. Create space, by seconds to escape. But Vader was there. Lightsaber carving through necroplasm with precision born from decades of experience. The Dark Lord had studied Spawn during their previous fight, learned his patterns, understood his capabilities. Where before Vader had tested, now he attacked to kill. Their clash shook the throne room's foundation. Lightsaber met chains. Force-enhanced strength collided with supernatural resilience. Spawn's cape caught Vader's blade, wrapped around his arm, tried to immobilize him. Vader used the Force to tear durasteel panels from the walls, hurled them at crushing velocity. Spawn dodged, teleported through. Shadows, the symbiotes. Dimensional shifting finally stable. Enough for combat use, and materialized behind Vader. Chains lashing toward the respiratory unit on his back. Destroy that, and Vader would suffocate within minutes. But the Dark Lord had anticipated the attack. He spun, lightsaber moving in a defensive pattern that severed chains before they could connect. His free hand extended, and force lightning erupted. Not the crushing telekinesis from before, but pure electrical energy that bypassed physical defenses and attacked nervous systems directly. The symbiote screamed as electricity coursed through it. Spawn felt his muscles seize, his consciousness fragment under the assault. This was what had broken Jedi, what had tortured rebels into submission, dark side power weaponized into pure agony. But Spawn had been tortured by Hell's masters, demons who'd refined suffering into art forms. Malbolgia had torn him apart, and rebuilt him hundreds of times, teaching him that pain was information, survivable if you refused to break. He pushed through the lightning, chains reforming despite the electrical interference, and caught Vader's wrist. The contact created feedback, electricity, flowing through chains back into its source, the necroplasm conducting and amplifying the attack. Vader's suit sparked. His respirator hitched. For the first time in the fight, the Dark Lord experienced his own weapon's agony. They broke apart, both damaged, both calculating next moves. The throne room was wrecked, walls scorched, floor cratered, royal guards unconscious or dead. The Inquisitors were regrouping, but they'd learned caution. This fight was beyond their level. And through it all, Palpatine sat on his throne, watching with fascination rather than concern. Magnificent, the Emperor breathed. You push Lord Vader to his limits. Few beings can claim such distinction. He stood slowly, descending from the throne. But you misunderstand something fundamental. I didn't offer you servitude because I need another weapon. Lord Vader suffices for that purpose. I offered because I saw potential for something greater. Palpatine extended both hands, and the Force itself seemed to concentrate in the throne room. Not lightning, not telekinesis, something deeper. The raw power of the dark side channeled through a being who'd mastered it for nearly a century. I could destroy you, Palpatine said conversationally, his voice carrying absolute confidence. Collapse your unnatural form. Scatter the necroplasm that sustains you. End your tormented existence. You are powerful, yes, but I am beyond power. I am the dark side made manifest. Spawn felt it, that terrible weight of accumulated malevolence pressing down from all directions. The air itself became hostile. The Force twisted into a weapon that attacked reality's foundations. This was what it meant to face a Sith Emperor at full strength. Not flashy techniques or brutal force, but fundamental domination of the very fabric of existence. But I won't, Palpatine continued. Because you interest me. Because beings who refuse corruption despite drowning in darkness are rare enough to preserve. Because his voice dropped to something almost kind. I remember what it was like to have principles worth dying for. I remember choosing the difficult path because it seemed righteous. He lowered his hands, the pressure dissipating. I was younger than you when I made my choice. Embraced the dark side fully, abandoned sentimentality. Became what the galaxy needed, a force of absolute order. It was the correct decision. But sometimes, rarely, I wonder what the alternative path might have yielded. Palpatine smiled beneath his hood. You remind me of that younger self. Stubborn, principled, convinced. That will alone can prevent corruption. So I'll make you a final offer. More generous than anything I've extended in decades. I'm not interested. Listen first, Palpatine commanded, his voice carrying force weight that made even Spawn's protest die. Leave Coruscant. Leave Imperial space entirely. Take your darkness to the outer rim, the unknown regions. Anywhere beyond my direct authority. Trouble me no further, and I'll trouble you not at all. You may even find purpose there, fighting pirates and slavers without Imperial complication. It was unexpected, genuine. Clemency from a being who'd genocide the Jedi. Spawn searched for the trap. The hidden angle. Why? Spawn demanded. You just said I'm a problem you can't ignore. Because problems exist at different scales, Palpatine explained. You are dangerous, yes, but localized. You threaten individual systems, perhaps sectors. My empire spans the galaxy. Dedicating resources to eliminating you would be wasteful when those resources could suppress actual rebellion. His expression became calculating. And because, should you survive your exile, should you grow more powerful, should you eventually realize that my offer was wisdom rather than corruption, I want you to remember that I showed mercy today, that I gave you opportunity to change your mind. You think I'll come back begging to serve. I think survival in the outer rim will teach you lessons that words cannot convey. I think desperation will erode principles that seem absolute today. I think, in 10 years or 20, you'll return to this throne room and accept what you now refuse. Palpatine's smile widened. But if I'm wrong, if you somehow maintain your convictions despite the galaxy's harsh realities, then you'll have proven yourself more remarkable than I believed. Either outcome serves my interests. Spawn understood. This was a long-term investment. Palpatine was betting that exile would break him, where direct corruption had failed. Let him struggle, let him suffer. Let him discover that power without structure was just chaos dressed in righteousness. The Emperor was probably right. Spawn had no resources, no allies he fully trusted, no knowledge of the galaxy beyond Coruscant. Survival alone would push him toward compromises he'd regret. Eventually, Palpatine's offer would look less like damnation and more like salvation. But that was future Spawn's problem. Present Spawn just needed to escape. I accept, Spawn said. I leave. You don't hunt me. We pretend this conversation never happened. Agreed. Palpatine returned to his throne, settling with satisfaction. Lord Vader will escort you to a shuttle. You have 1 day to depart Imperial space. After that, our mercy expires. Vader deactivated his lightsaber, his respirator cycling heavily from the fight's exertion. Follow me. They walked through the Imperial Palace in silence, past ruined throne room, through corridors where stormtroopers snapped to attention despite their confusion about why a prisoner was being escorted rather than executed. At the landing platform, a small shuttle waited, old, barely functional, but space-worthy. Before Spawn boarded, Vader spoke. The Emperor believes you'll break. That exile will corrupt what his offers could not. What do you believe? Vader was silent for a long moment. I believe the dark side takes everyone eventually. Some fall quickly, some resist for years. But gravity always wins. His mask turned toward Spawn. When you return, and you will return, remember that. I offered you this warning. Remember that every choice in service to darkness makes the next choice easier, until you can't distinguish service from slavery. Speaking from experience, always. Vader's mechanical breathing was the only sound. The Emperor thinks I don't know I'm enslaved. He's wrong. I know exactly what I am. But I've made so many choices in service to power that choosing differently now would invalidate everything. The Jedi I killed, the worlds I burned, the people I betrayed. Admitting those were mistakes means admitting I destroyed myself for nothing. He turned to leave, then paused. At least you have the chance to choose differently. Don't waste it pretending principles alone can sustain you. They can't. I learned that lesson on Mustafar, burning alive, watching everything I loved turn to ash because I believed I was strong enough to use darkness without being used. Vader walked away, leaving Spawn alone with a shuttle and a galaxy's worth of uncertainty. Spawn boarded the vessel, fired up ancient engines, and lifted off from Coruscant. As the planet fell away below, he looked back at the city world one final time. Somewhere down there, Numa and the rebels were fighting their hopeless war. Gracchus was scheming new criminal enterprises. Array was hiding from inquisitors who'd never stop hunting her. And in the Imperial Palace, Palpatine was waiting patiently for Spawn to learn that exile was just another form of imprisonment. The shuttle's navigation computer showed routes to the outer rim, lawless territories beyond Imperial control, where warlords and pirates ruled, where beings disappeared and nobody asked questions. It was perfect for someone who wanted to be left alone. It was also perfect for someone being slowly, inevitably corrupted by isolation and desperation. Spawn set course for the unknown regions, toward territories even the Empire's vast bureaucracy hadn't fully mapped. Maybe out there, beyond civilization's reach, he could find something worth fighting for that didn't require selling his soul. Or maybe Palpatine was right, and he was just delaying the inevitable. Either way, Coruscant disappeared behind him, and a new chapter of survival began. 6 months in the Outer Rim taught Spawn lessons the Empire never could. He'd found refuge on Lotho Minor, a junkyard world where failed machinery and broken beings collected like sediment. The planet was toxic, hostile, forgotten by galactic civilization, perfect for someone trying to disappear. He'd carved out territory in the scrap canyons, using salvage technology and necroplasmic manipulation to create a base that was equal parts fortress and tomb. The isolation should have been peaceful. Instead, it was suffocating. Without constant conflict, without the adrenaline of combat and survival, Spawn had time to think, time to remember, time to confront what he'd become across 2 universes and 1 resurrection. The symbiote pulsed. Around him, necroplasm that had once sustained him, now feeling like a parasite he couldn't remove. Every use of his power drew on the dark side, and even in the Outer Rim's lawless territories, suffering and death were abundant. He'd fought pirates raiding mining colonies, stopped slavers running sentient cargo, destroyed a spice operation that was poisoning an entire moon's water supply. Good work, by any measure. Lives saved, evil punished. But each victory pushed him deeper into darkness. The necroplasm adapted too efficiently, learned too quickly from the dark side's lessons. Spawn found himself making choices that his pre-hell self would have questioned, killing when capture might have worked, using torture for information when patience could have sufficed, allowing collateral damage when precision would have been harder. The line between necessary violence and enjoyed cruelty was blurring, and Spawn wasn't sure he cared anymore. One night, if night meant anything on a world where toxic clouds blocked the stars, he sat in his scrap metal sanctuary and pulled out the comlink Numa had given him, the encrypted rebel frequency, and used since he'd left Coruscant. He could contact them, ask for help, for perspective, for anything that reminded him he was more than just a weapon pointed at problems. His thumb hovered over the activation switch for 10 minutes. Then he put it away. The rebellion couldn't help him. They had their own desperate struggles, their own compromises with darkness in service of light. Joining them would just mean replacing the Emperor's chains with different ones. Same cage, new bars. But isolation wasn't working either. The longer he stayed alone, the more the symbiote's whispers sounded like his own thoughts. The more the dark side felt like home rather than corruption. Palpatine had been right about one thing. Principles didn't feed you, didn't keep you warm, didn't give you purpose when every day was identical struggle against entropy. The Emperor's offer whispered in memory, seductive in its simplicity. Go back. Accept. Use the resources to actually help people on a galactic scale instead of these scattered interventions. In forgotten systems, what did pride matter against measurable good? Spawn was considering it. Actually, genuinely considering returning to Coruscant and bending knee when the distress signal reached Lotho Minor. It came through old smuggler frequencies, the kind pirates monitored for easy targets. A colony transport, engines failing, life support critical, requesting immediate assistance. Coordinates placed them 2 systems away, well within Spawn's range if he stole a functional ship from the scrap yards. He almost ignored it. Not his problem. The galaxy was full of beings in distress, and he couldn't save them all. Getting involved would just delay the inevitable decision about returning to the Empire. But something in the transmission caught his attention, a child's voice in the background, crying. Spawn was moving before he consciously decided. The symbiote surged with purpose, chains manifesting, cape spreading. He found a barely functional freighter in the salvage yards, something with engines and hyperspace capability. Even if the life support was questionable, the scavengers who claimed it as territory tried to stop him. They learned quickly that trying to stop Spawn was fatal. He reached the colony transport within an hour, dropping out of hyperspace to find it adrift and surrounded. 3 pirate corvettes, painted in the colors of the Zygerian Slavers Guild, tractoring the transport into their flagship's cargo bay. Spawn recognized the tactics immediately. They'd disable the transport, board it, execute resistors, and sell the rest at auction. Standard operating procedure for slavers, who knew the Empire wouldn't intervene. This far from controlled space, the pirates had no idea they were being hunted. Spawn's freighter coasted toward them, broadcasting false damage signals, playing dead. The pirates ignored him, another piece of wreckage in a sector full of debris. By the time they realized their mistake, he was already aboard their flagship. What followed wasn't a fight. It was extermination. Spawn moved through the pirate vessel like a shadow given teeth. His chains wrapped around throats, crushed windpipes, left bodies scattered in corridors. That quickly filled with emergency lighting and blaring alarms. The pirates fired wildly, their blasters ineffective, against necroplasm that absorbed energy and reformed instantly. He found their captain on the bridge, a Zygerian female whose species had built an empire on suffering and bondage. She reached for a detonator, dead. Man's switch that would destroy the colony transport along with her ship, and Spawn's cape caught her wrist before she could press it. Please, she gasped, all predatory confidence evaporating. We can negotiate. Credits, information, anything. Spawn thought about mercy, about restraint, about the principles he'd claimed to preserve. Then he thought about the child's voice on the distress signal, asking if they were going to die. About all the beings this slaver had sold into bondage. All the lives destroyed to feed her empire of exploitation. No, Spawn said simply, and his chains tightened. He left no survivors. Not the captain, not the crew, not the secondary ship's personnel. Every slaver who'd participated in the raid died in ways that made the necroplasm sing with dark satisfaction. When it was done, Spawn freed the colony transport, repaired their engines with salvage parts, and watched them jump to hyperspace without ever seeing their rescuer. They'd tell stories about an angel of death that appeared from nowhere. They'd build legends around a being that protected the helpless. They'd be wrong. Angels didn't enjoy killing as much as Spawn just had. He returned to Lotho Minor, to his scrap sanctuary, and sat in the darkness confronting an uncomfortable truth. He'd crossed a line, not because he'd killed many times before, but because he'd enjoyed it, felt satisfaction in the slavers' terror, pleasure in their suffering. The dark side had taken another piece of him, and he hadn't even noticed until it was gone. This was what Vader had warned about, what Rey had tried to prevent, what Palpatine had counted on. Every choice in service to darkness made the next easier, until you couldn't distinguish necessary evil from embraced malevolence. Spawn could feel himself slipping, could recognize the descent even as he justified it. The slavers deserved death. The galaxy was better without them. He'd done good work, by any utilitarian calculation. But the person who'd made that calculation wasn't L. Simmons anymore. Wasn't even the Spawn who'd first clawed his way out of hell. It was something newer, colder, shaped by two universes, worth of darkness into a being that solved problems through escalating violence. Maybe that was necessary. Maybe the galaxy required such beings to balance the scales. Or maybe that was just another rationalization for becoming a monster. Spawn didn't know anymore. What he did know was that staying isolated was accelerating the corruption rather than preventing it. Without witnesses, without people to remind him of his humanity, he was free to slide into darkness without even recognizing the descent. He needed an anchor, something or someone that could pull him back when he went too far. The rebellion, maybe, not as servants or masters, but as colleagues who fought the same battles from different angles. Spawn activated Numa's comlink. The encryption took moments to sync, and then her voice crackled through, surprised, relieved, cautious. Spawn, we thought you were dead. Or worse, that you'd accepted the Emperor's offer. Neither. Just surviving in the Outer Rim. Fighting pirates. Making enemies. He paused, forcing words that tasted like admission of weakness. I need help. Silence on the other end. Then Numa's voice, careful. What kind of help? The kind where someone tells me when I've gone too far. When I'm using necessary force versus becoming what I fight. I'm losing track. Need someone who still remembers where the line is. More silence. Spawn could almost hear her internal debate. Trust the powerful. Being who'd rejected both Empire and Rebellion. Or maintained safe distance from something that scared even Darth Vader. All right, Numa said finally. We've got a situation on Ryloth. Slavers backed by Imperial contractors. Immune to conventional assault because they've got legitimacy papers. We can't touch them without making the whole system come down on us. But someone with your abilities, working independently. Send me the coordinates. I'll handle it. Spawn. Her voice hardened. Handle it doesn't mean slaughter. We need these slavers exposed. Their operation documented. Their Imperial connections proven. Dead slavers just become martyrs. And the Empire replaces them. Survivors who testify? That damages infrastructure. It was exactly the kind of limitation Spawn needed. Not freedom to destroy, but purpose that required restraint. Understood. Send the details. The mission data arrived within minutes. Spawn studied it, making plans that balanced efficiency with the rebellions. Need for evidence and witnesses. It felt strange, good strange, to operate with oversight again. To have someone questioning his methods rather than just pointing him at targets. Maybe this was the answer. Not isolation that bred monsters. Not service to empires that demanded them. But cooperation with people who needed power but wouldn't worship it. As he prepared to leave Lotho Minor, Spawn noticed something he'd missed during 6 months of isolation. The scrap sanctuary he'd built had started to change. Necroplasm had seeped into the walls, corrupting machinery in subtle ways. Symbols appeared in the metal, angular glyphs that resembled Sith script from the holocron fragments. warnings or promises in languages he'd never studied but somehow understood. The dark side was marking territory, claiming this place as its own, claiming him as its own. Spawn destroyed the sanctuary systematically, using his power to collapse it into unrecognizable debris. He wouldn't leave monuments to his corruption, wouldn't create temples to darkness in forgotten places. If he was going to fall, he'd do it fighting gravity every step, not building shrines to celebrate the descent. The freighter limped into hyperspace, carrying Spawn toward Ryloth, toward another mission that would test whether he could still distinguish necessary evil from embraced malevolence. He didn't know if the rebellion could save him from corruption, didn't know if anyone could, but at least he'd be trying. At least he'd have witnesses. If he finally crossed the line from anti-hero to monster, and somewhere in the galaxy, in the Imperial Palace on Coruscant, Emperor Palpatine felt a disturbance in the Force, his investment showing signs of unexpected resilience. The dark side whispered that Spawn was resisting still, clinging to principles despite 6 months of isolation that should have broken him. Fascinating, Palpatine murmured to the empty throne room. Perhaps I underestimated him. Or perhaps he simply requires more time, more pressure, more reasons to accept that darkness is inevitable. The Emperor was patient. He'd waited decades for Anakin Skywalker to fall. He could wait decades more for this. Spawn to realize that fighting corruption was exhausting, pointless, and ultimately futile. Everyone broke eventually. It was simply a matter of finding the right leverage, applying the right pressure, waiting for the moment when we'll finally surrender to necessity. Palpatine smiled beneath his hood. The galaxy was full of such moments, and Spawn would face many more before his resistance finally, inevitably failed. On Lotho Minor, in the ruins of Spawn's destroyed sanctuary, the necroplasmic symbols in the metal began to fade. Not erased, merely dormant, waiting for the next time darkness found purchase in forgotten places. The dark side was patient too, and unlike the Emperor, it couldn't be defeated or refused permanently. It was fundamental force, gravity of the soul, pulling everything toward entropy and malevolence. Spawn was fighting that gravity with will alone. How long could anyone maintain such exhausting defiance? The answer was unknown, the outcome uncertain. But the struggle itself, the refusal to simply surrender and accept corruption as inevitable, that was worth something. That mattered, even if it ultimately failed. In the space between Lotho Minor and Ryloth, traveling through hyperspace's impossible dimensions, Spawn sat in his stolen freighter and contemplated the road ahead. He'd refused the Emperor, rejected Hell's chains, destroyed the sanctuary that darkness tried to build. But he could feel the corruption growing, could recognize that every fight brought him closer to becoming what he fought against. Maybe that was unavoidable. Maybe the galaxy required such beings, warriors who embraced darkness without being consumed, soldiers who killed without enjoying it, protectors who used evil as a tool without letting it become identity. Or maybe that was just the rationalization every monster used to justify their existence. Spawn didn't have answers, but he had purpose, he had witnesses, and he had one more chance to prove that will could triumph over gravity. That choice could defeat inevitability. That a being who'd been to hell and back could still find redemption in a galaxy far, far away. The Ryloth mission awaited. After that, more battles, more choices, more opportunities to either maintain his humanity or lose it completely. He'd face them as he'd faced everything since resurrection, one fight at a time, one decision at a time, one desperate refusal to surrender at a time. It wasn't hope. Hope was for people who believed in happy endings. But it was defiance. And sometimes, defiance was enough. The galaxy would remember the Wanderer differently, depending on who told the story. The Empire recorded him as a threat neutralized through diplomatic expulsion, being too dangerous to contain, but too isolated to matter. Palpatine kept his records private, a long-term investment in corruption that might take decades to mature. Vader filed reports that were clinically precise, noting capabilities, weaknesses, and the unsettling observation that Spawn fought like a Jedi, who'd embraced darkness without abandoning principles. The comparison troubled the Dark Lord in ways he couldn't articulate. The rebellion spoke of him as a reluctant ally, a force of nature that destroyed slavers and pirates across the Outer Rim. Numas, Reports described a being who struggled visibly with his own power, who asked for limits when he could have demanded freedom, who chose restraint when annihilation would have been easier. They debated whether to trust him, whether his darkness would eventually consume him, whether their association would damn them by proximity. The debates continued for years, but the missions continued too. He was useful, dangerous, but useful. The criminal underworld whispered legends. Gracchus told stories of a being who'd walked into the Emperor's throne room and walked back out through sheer defiant will. Pirates warned their crews about the shadow that appeared in slave ships, leaving only corpses and freed captives. The Hutts put bounties on his head, small ones, never large enough to actually attract serious hunters, because being smart enough to collect were smart enough to know that hunting spawn was suicide with extra steps. And in the forgotten places of the galaxy, in ruins and abandoned stations and derelict ships, scavengers occasionally found symbols, carved into metal, angular glyphs that resembled Sith script but predated any known dark side tradition. They marked territory Spawn had claimed and then abandoned, warnings or promises in languages that bypassed understanding and spoke directly to the soul. Here walked something that refused to stay damned. Here fought a being that knew darkness intimately but would not surrender to it. Here died those who thought power without conscience could ever be sustained. 6 years after leaving Coruscant, Spawn stood on a moon above Ryloth, watching a slave auction burn. He'd exposed the operation, provided evidence to the rebellion, ensured the Empire's complicity would be documented. Then he'd killed everyone responsible anyway, because documentation didn't comfort the dead or heal the traumatized. The dark side sang through him with satisfied hunger. The necroplasm pulsed with absorbed power, and Spawn wondered, as he'd wondered 1,000 times, whether this victory was justice or just violence wearing a righteous mask. He still didn't know, probably never would, but he kept fighting anyway, kept choosing even when every choice felt like compromise, kept refusing even when refusal was exhausting beyond measure. Because the alternative, surrendering to darkness, accepting that corruption was inevitable, becoming the monster that Palpatine, and hell and the dark side itself wanted him to be, that would mean Al Simmons had died for nothing, that every principle he'd ever held was meaningless, that damnation was truly permanent. And Spawn refused to accept that, would refuse it until the day something finally killed him permanently, or until the galaxy found a way to send him home, or until corruption consumed him so completely that refusal became impossible. Whichever came first. The rebellion's extraction ship appeared in orbit, come to retrieve evidence and survivors. Numa's voice crackled through his comlink. Good work. Brutal, but good. You're still walking the line. For now, Spawn replied. That's all any of us can manage. For now. Her voice carried understanding, born from years of her own desperate compromises. There's another situation. Mandalorian warlord enslaving villages, using the Empire's distraction with the rebellion to build his own empire. Interested? Another mission, another fight, another chance to prove that we could defeat gravity, or another step toward inevitable corruption. Spawn should have been tired, should have felt the weight of endless battles pressing him down. Instead, he felt something almost like purpose. Not hope, never hope, but direction, meaning, the knowledge that his existence, however damned and compromised, still mattered in ways that purely evil beings couldn't match. Send the coordinates, Spawn said. I'll handle it. The comlink clicked off. The extraction ship descended. And above it all, stars burned in configurations Al Simmons had never seen from Earth. Constellations in a galaxy that wasn't his, but had become his battleground anyway. He'd been to hell and back, faced demons and angels, made deals with devils and broke their chains. And now, stranded in a galaxy governed by the Force, hunted by emperors and used by rebellions, Spawn continued the only mission that mattered. Survive, resist, refuse to become the darkness he wielded. Some would call it hopeless. Others would call it heroic. Spawn called it Tuesday. The galaxy far, far away would never fully understand what walked among its ruins and fought in its shadows, would never comprehend that the being they feared or courted or hunted was simply a man who died badly, resurrected worse, and refused to let either death or damnation define him. But they'd remember. Oh yes, they'd remember. because legends were built on such defiance. And Spawn, whatever else he was, had become a legend in hell, on Earth, and now across the stars. The Force itself seemed to acknowledge this. The dark side's hunger mingling with something else, something that almost resembled respect. Here was a being that drew power from darkness without being darkness, that killed without losing the knowledge that killing was wrong, that fought evil without believing himself righteous. The galaxy had never seen his like before, might never see it again, and that, in the end, was enough.